Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council, Parking Authority, and Redevelopment Agency meeting of April 16th, 2007. I'd ask that our clerk call roll.
Council agency members Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Diane McNutt.
Here.
Barbara Spector.
Here.
Steve Glickman.
Here.
And Mayor and Chair Joe Przinsky.
Here. We have the good fortune to have one of our future leaders with us tonight. This is Melissa Lico, a Los Gatos resident and sixth grader honor student at North Valley Baptist School in Santa Clara. Melissa will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance as part of our special Future Leaders program. And this program is designed to integrate young people in our community to the public process. We'll be having a different member of our young community with us at every council meeting to lead us in the pledge. So tonight, again, with great privilege, I ask if Melissa Lico would come to the mic, please. And will we all stand?
Pledge to the American flag, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you very much. Again, let's thank Melissa for being with us tonight. All right, before we go on to the next item on our agenda, again, our country has experienced a tragedy. I'm sure we're all aware of what happened this morning, one of the great universities in our country, Virginia Tech. Obviously, an event that's unexplainable, given the nature of our society, and yet these things have happened all too frequently. As of this time, apparently there are at least 33 dead as a result, and more than 20 still in hospital. And it serves us all to question those things that would cause this kind of behavior, but more significantly, remember those people who have suffered, both the individuals who are victims and the families of these victims. And so I'm going to ask for a moment of silence in their behalf. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is our closed session report. Ask our attorney if there's anything to report.
There were no closed sessions this evening, so there's no report.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda, under the topic presentations, is we're privileged to have with us tonight Barbara Walke, Regional Vice President for Silicon Valley Central Coast Region of the American Cancer Society, and Alexis Riley, Relay for Life volunteer, and they will both be making a presentation to us tonight. And if I could invite both women to the microphone, please.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here this evening and have the opportunity to talk to you about the American Cancer Society and how important the Relay for Life in Los Gatos is to your community. As you know, cancer does not discriminate. It's not to the young, the old, the rich or poor, and I'm sure many of you here in the audience and here up on the podium this evening have had someone who has had cancer. Maybe you've been a caregiver, or perhaps you know a cancer survivor. But I'm here to tell you tonight that the American Cancer Society is here for you and your community. We're a nationwide community-based volunteer health organization, and we're dedicated to eliminating cancer as a major problem by preventing cancer, saving lives from cancer, and diminishing suffering from cancer through research, education, advocacy, and service. Through the years, we've had many, many accomplishments, and I'd like to just point out a couple. Since 1946, we've spent nearly $3 billion on cancer research. This is only second to the federal government. And we have funded 40 Nobel laureates. Because the American Cancer Society funds young investigators, 25% of those young investigators, they have gone on to get future grants with the NCI, the CDC, and they have gone on to win the Nobel Prize for their work in cancer research. And because of our work today in early prevention, detection, and the advancements in the treatments that we have seen, there are nearly 10 million Americans today who are cancer survivors. We've also know that a lot more about cancer than we did many, many years ago. And I began with the American Cancer Society in 1973, and I can tell you we've made great, great strides. We know that 2/3 of all cancer come from two reasons. One is smoking, and the other is being overweight and obesity. Our prevention guidelines are out there to tell people not to smoke. Get your mammogram starting at age 40. For men, please get your PSA, and that's not a public service announcement exam. It's your prostate-specific antigen blood test at the age of 50. And for both men and women at age 50, get your colonoscopy, your sigmoidoscopy, or your fecal occult blood test. One of the three. Anything. Just do something, because 46% of Californians today are not getting tested. Our free programs for anti-smoking and nutrition physical activity include Teens Kick Ash for the mid and high schools, Colleges Against Cancer. We collaborate with Take Charge, which is the California Smokers Helpline, and the American Cancer Society has its own quit line for cessation programs. We have Spring into Health for our 4th to 5th graders, Generation Fit for the 11th to 8th grade, 18-year-olds, and Active for Life for all of you here who are in the workplace. If you have cancer and you need support, we're there. We have a 1-800-ACS-2345 line that's open 24/7, 365 days of the year. You can call in the middle of the night and get support. I know when my dad had prostate cancer, I called immediately and they were able to send me as much information as I could possibly have and questions about what he can do to ask his doctor about his treatment options. And that really was supportive, because the doctors today are telling you, you can have chemotherapy, radiation therapy, a combination of both. It's up to you. You have a chance to have control of your life. So you need to ask the right questions and do that. We have a Reach to Recovery program for women who have breast cancer, visiting others who have breast cancer, and a man-to-man program for those who have prostate cancer. We have a support group for them as well. Our Road to Recovery program is one of our most important programs, because this is the program where we transport patients to and from their treatment. We know that if we can't get them to treatment, we can't save their lives. So volunteers offer their car, their gas, their money. We provide reimbursement for gas to volunteers and to patients and their families, so we can assure that they do get what they need in terms of their treatments. We have a Look Good, Feel Better program. This is in collaboration with the National Cosmetology Association that teaches women how to use scarves and wigs and makeup and other accessories to recover their sense of self-esteem due to the loss of hair or poor skin. We have an I Can Cope program and a Cancer Survivors Network. All of these are free programs to anyone in the community who has a diagnosis of cancer. The venue for the American Cancer Society to impart much of this information is through our Relay for Life. And this information is very powerful and can save lives. And who better to share the experience as a survivor than Alexis Riley, who's here tonight to tell you her personal story and how the American Cancer Society has supported her and helped her. So Alexis?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Alexis Riley. I live here in Los Gatos, and I'm a student at Archbishop Mitty High School. And I'm also a proud volunteer of the American Cancer Society. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak to you today on behalf of the American Cancer Society and the Relay for Life event we have planned for July 21st and 22nd of this year. I would like to share with you my personal experience, as well as ask for the town's support for this important community event. When I was 15, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was treated at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital with chemotherapy and radiation. In addition to my medical help from Stanford, I found venues for support through the American Cancer Society. It wasn't until after I was in remission that I began my involvement as a volunteer with the American Cancer Society. I worked as a volunteer at the Los Gatos Discovery Shop, a secondhand store where all the money goes to the fight against cancer. Through my involvement there, I learned about Relay for Life, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. I got involved with Relay, talking to friends and family about forming teams and getting involved as well. During the past 2 years, I have worked on the event planning committee as the youth chair, encouraging students and other young adults to get involved in the Los Gatos Relay for Life. Relay for Life is a 24-hour team event to raise money for cancer research, advocacy, and education. It begins at 10 a.m. on Saturday, July 21st, and goes until 10 a.m. on Sunday, July 22nd. And it will be at Fisher Middle School. In those 24 hours, we will honor survivors, caregivers, and those still fighting their battle against cancer. It is a family event, and all ages are encouraged and welcome to attend. At dusk, we light small bags called luminarias that will circle the track with names of cancer survivors and those we wish to remember. Relay for Life is a beautiful and emotional event that is important to me and the Los Gatos community. This event is almost 100% volunteer-driven, with residents from Los Gatos coming together to plan this relay over many months. People are giving of their personal time and commitment to make this happen. Unfortunately, I'm sure many of you on the town council and your staff know a loved one who has battled cancer. It is time we come together as a community to do something about this terrible disease. I would like to personally invite all of you to get involved and support us on the track in this July. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear it for our presenters. Then I wonder if I could ask Alexis and Barbara to come to this podium. In honor of the initiation of this particular very worthy cause, we created a proclamation. Whereas cancer is predicted to strike 1 of every 3 Americans sometime in our lifetime, with an estimated 151,250 new cases of diagnosed cancer in California in 2007. And whereas the American Cancer Society is the nation's largest and most respected voluntary health organization since 1913, and has funded research to detect and treat cancer, improving cancer survival rates to over 50%. And whereas Relay for Life is a volunteer, community-based coalition of local citizens dedicated to eliminating cancer as a major health problem through education awareness, financial support, benefiting the American Cancer Society's research and support programs. And whereas Paint Our Town Purple, an anti-cancer campaign will be celebrated on May 1st, 2007 to unite local Los Gatos community members through the display of purple. And whereas the Los Gatos Relay for Life, a community event designed to bring family, friends, businesses, and organizations together to make a difference in the battle against cancer, will be held at Fisher Middle School on July 22nd, 2007. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Joe Przezinski, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim May 1st, 2007, as Relay for Life Paint Our Town Purple Day, and July 21st and 22nd, 2007, Los Gatos Relay for Life Day in the town of Los Gatos. We further urge all citizens to recognize and participate with this anti-cancer campaign held within our town. Signed by the mayor, this date, 2007. Ladies. All right, we're ready to continue now with our public meeting. And just kind of a couple of items of interest. If you intend to speak to any item on tonight's agenda, then I'd ask you to fill out one of those gray cards in the seats. I'd bring them to our clerk here on my left. and that would be for any item on tonight's agenda. And I hope you had a chance to get agendas off the table in the foyer. In addition, tonight we have with us Dan Siegel, who is our attorney for the night. Ori Korb, our town attorney, is not available, and Dan is sitting in. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for being here. The first issue for us to take up is the consent calendar. These are a number of items that can be acted on in a single motion, and I'd ask if any member of council wishes to pull an item to be heard later in the meeting. Seeing none, are there any items that the public would like pulled from tonight's agenda? Seeing none, then I'm going to ask for a motion.
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is verbal communication, and this is a chance for us to speak to any item not on tonight's agenda, and those items would be obviously not able to be acted on by the council, but if you wish to speak to any item, again, not on the agenda, then we'll offer you 3 minutes at the podium to do so. And first speaker I have is Michael Silva. Michael Silva.
Good evening. My name is Michael Silva. I live at 675 North Santa Cruz Avenue here in Los Gatos. I've been a resident for a long time. At the last meeting, I brought up an issue about dirt, or more specifically, soil removal. And due to the number of cars and the issues that were at hand at that evening, it was quite intensive. So as much as I had a question, it didn't get answered, and that was fine with me. I thought I'd come back and bring it up again. I'm wondering if there are any standards that Los Gatos has, our town, on dealing with removal of soil and taking it out of town somewhere else. My personal opinion, and I don't really like to get into personal opinions because I don't think that's really the issue here, but is that if we're going to be green as we profess we are, not only on the outside as what people see, but also on the inside, that we should make some efforts, if there aren't any standards and guidelines, to at least look at that and try to keep the soil here in town and replace it or put it into places that's well needed. I'm sure there's plenty around. Probably talk to Public Works and see what they could do about that instead of having to buy soil to bring in to backfill retaining walls and other things like that. Let's keep our soil, our Los Gatos soil, here in town. Additionally, do we have guidelines or standards set up to look at the amount of impact that the tonnage of soil that is removed from one area and taken to another wherever that may be, has on the roads that we have worked so hard for so many years to produce so that we have nice roadways and things like that to travel on, to and from home, etc. You can't look at this, it has to be a long-range issue. You can't look at this at like, okay, well, they drove down here this month. I mean, and it doesn't matter whether it's 300 cubic yards or 16,000 cubic yards. It's going to have an impact, and it's not going to show up for 3 seasons, ultimately. If you were to take the weight of these semi-trucks hauling dirt from wherever, point A to point B, and traveling down the roads, and in one scenario we're talking about 1,000 trucks, but it really doesn't matter whether it's 1,000 or it's 10 or it's 5. That impact on some of the roads, particularly in some of the outside areas that we're looking at people developing and whatnot today, are going to have an impact, and it's not going to show up until you've had rainfall for 3 years. That's going to be the impact. That's where it's at. Do we have standards and guidelines for that?
Thank you, Mr.
Are there any
Silva.
questions I can answer?
Thank you very much. And council, I'm going to refer back to the manager if there's any issue we need to address at a future time related to that. Thank you. Next speaker will be Ray Davis, Citizen Ray.
Yes. Good evening. My first comment has to do with the issue that I brought up at the last meeting, the concern for public safety for the children that use the splash fountains here in Los Gatos, okay? And I recommended signs prohibiting diapers, kids in diapers from using the splash fountains. You know, it's just normal common sense for most people, but some people don't understand that water is not fresh. It's all recirculated, okay? And the children must not wear diapers, and they must not gargle, and they must not swallow that water. So, you know, the public health demands that the sign goes up to warn the public. And, by gosh, I understand that through the good offices of the mayor that sign is going to happen shortly. So how wonderful to come down here and play the squeaky axle a little bit and to get some grease. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next. Very concerned about Ms. McNutt and her relationship to the land use application on DeSantis property, the massive hotel, home, castle, whatever you want to call it, on Kennedy Road, okay? I double-checked with the tape, Mrs. McNutt, and it's exactly as I heard before and stated, all right? It says you have a personal passion for affordable homes, and at the same time you support the concept of estate-sized homes in Los Gatos to the tune of 10,000 to 11,000 square foot. And that's what you said, and it's on the tape, so don't deny it. If you deny it, you're in a flight from reality. And I'll bring the tape down next time and play it. I don't want to see you shake your head. You're shaking your head. You're out of touch with reality, my dear. So anyway, you need to excuse yourself from any further public discussions because the law requires it. California land use law prohibits a sitting council member from deciding on an issue where her mind or his mind is already made up before the hearing. And your statement is positive proof that your mind is already made up on this issue. So you need to be recused. If not, and you continue to offend, we will see that you are properly
Thank you,
dealt
Mr. Davis. Thank you very much. All right, if you would wish.
Thank you. Once again, I will remind everyone that you can see live in action video on the website of the town, or you can get a videotape out of the library, and you can see what exactly is said at any particular council meeting by any particular person. But because this question came up, I did go back, and we do have a word-by-word transcript of what I said, which I will read to you. One of the as I did last time, so everyone listen this time. One of the values I have as a member of this community is that we have a wide array of housing options for the people who live here. I'm very passionate for having small, below-market units for seniors and others who are on fixed income. And we also need to have opportunities for people who have the resources to build incredibly beautiful estate homes. This is the general plan.
Mr. Davis, you're out of order. Mr. Davis, that's a warning.
This is the general plan of the town of Los Gatos. In the section on housing, the goal number 1 for the town of Los Gatos is to improve the choice of housing opportunities for senior citizens, families and singles, and for all income groups through a variety of housing types and sizes, including a mixture of ownership and rental housing. My statement reflected the general plan of the town of Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNutt. Next speaker is Karen DeLumi.
Hello. I'd like to make a few comments that will tie together towards the end here. There's been the topic about if our town is youth-friendly, and I think this needs to be looked at and subdivided into further categories. There's the social responsibility side that is just morally sound, good decision-making for a town, and the other is friendly activities that the youth of our town really want to partake in, that they see it as for them. That's what they are going to see as youth-friendly. For instance, CASA crosses both. It has activities, but it also has other services. The soccer fields and the skate park also cross both. Now we have an opportunity. If we are going to be selling that land for $6 million, this is money that's coming from recreation funds. What a golden opportunity to put it back into some type of recreation activities. We have quite a few around here that you hear over and over again of how greatly we need them. I see that this could potentially almost be like a test of the moral foundation of our town by doing the right thing. And how do you do this objectively? Well, here's my suggestion. Create an objective worksheet with criteria related to rec-related type projects. List them out, and let's see, where was I? List them out and see how much money we're talking about is needed for those. If you looked at the $6 million, you could create an endowment for the venue so it wouldn't be broke the way it is right now. You could purchase land for soccer fields, and you can fund the skate park and have money left over for the police station and possibly some for the library. And please, just a note, if the Fasona land goes for what it does, there's no way that ours is $1 million for the land for the skate park. So I think we need to readdress when we're quoting how much money the town has given towards a skate park. So please consider that. And come visit us at the booth near the farmers market, because we're moving forward, but we really appreciate it if this test would be taken on by you guys and you would just fund the skate park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeLumi. Any comments from any member of council or staff regarding this? There are a couple of things that I think probably would have to be addressed for clarity purposes, but since it's just comment to us, we'll take that into consideration. Dennis Byron is the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On April 4th at 3:30, the Los Gatos Town Council Policy Committee met, and they were on their agenda, and unfortunately I found this out 2 days later. It came across my desk from our political advisor at CAR. There was a discussion on donation policies, and the consideration on that donation policy was that there would be a limitation on the size of the plaque for anybody that donated. The size of that plaque would be 4 by 8, approximately this large. My job that I've taken on is to help fund the skateboard park. I'm approaching major donors. When I mean major donors, I'm talking about people that want to invest $250,000 to $750,000 on this. If I'm asking them to donate that much money, you are limiting my ability to raise funds by making me adhere to a plaque that's this large. If you think about it, maybe we should put this in retrospect and say maybe we should limit the size of the plaque on Balzer Field to 4 by 8 inches. Or what about Bagley Field, or Billy Jones Railroad, or Bob Mason's Carousel? Or what about the Ray Collishaw Gym that has a sign across the top that's almost in neon lights? Or what about the bricks at the gazebo? Should we limit all those to a 4 by 6 plaque? I'm just bringing this question to you. I hope you take it under consideration. Please don't handicap me. Show that you're youth-friendly and allow me to raise funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byron. Just a quick comment. Some of those items mentioned were not town-based. They were private organizations or the school district. Okay. But we hear you out, and we'll take it under consideration. Ms. McNutt.
Thank you. I do think we need to clarify, and maybe the manager would be best to do this, or Mrs. Spector as chair of the Council Policy Committee, but how the process works and discussion purposes versus what might actually be brought to council in a few weeks.
Yes, thank you. The committee referenced is a subcommittee of the council. They have been charged by the council to ferret out the various policy issues, which will be brought forward for full council discussion. Right now, we are targeting May 21st for that, and stay tuned for the actual final date by monitoring the council agenda. But right now, that's our target as staff.
Okay, what again was that date, Madam Manager?
May 21st.
21st. Thank you. All right. I have no other cards for verbal communications. Seeing no one interested in bringing a card up for verbal communications, then we're going to move on to...
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
Councilmember Glickman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Knowing that we are going to discuss that specific policy, I'll reserve any comments for that discussion when it's appropriately on the agenda. I'll just comment at this point that I look forward to it because I also looked at some of the proposals with some degree of concern.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman. All right. That brings us then to public hearings. We have 2 public hearings tonight. The first is to consider an appeal of the Planning Commission decision denying a request to construct a single-family residence on property zoned R120. That would be APN 529-31041. Architecture and site application SO721. Property located on Reservoir Road is lot number 3. The property owner is Mark Von Keigel and Diane Robinson, and the applicant appellant is Tony Jeans. I'd ask that the staff make whatever presentation appropriate at this time. Mr. Sudo, welcome back from Philadelphia.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back in dry weather. Tonight the council is considering an appeal on an architectural and site application for construction of a new home in the Hillside area. The site is zoned R1 single-family residential, but is subject to the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines given its location within the town-designated Hillside area. In terms of background, this site is part of a 4-lot subdivision. That was the location of the former San Jose Water Reservoir site. That subdivision was approved by the town in 2003, and grading and filling of the reservoir was completed in the summer of 2004. The subdivision application and the subdivision approval identified approximate building envelopes and probable tree removals. There is a condition of approval that states that those envelopes were to be used as a guide for future development, and the town council stated that the exhibit that contained those building envelopes was a, quote, guiding light for consideration of future architectural and site applications. The proposed home is a 2-level home of just under 4,000 square feet in size with a 715 square foot garage. It contains also a 1,093 square foot cellar, which is exempted from the size of the home under the town's requirements. The house is positioned and designed such that from Reservoir Road, it is 1 story in appearance from the street and steps down the hillside. It's within the maximum floor area allowed by the Hillside Design Development Standards and Guidelines, and the house has been lowered into that hillside to reduce the apparent height of the structure and to hide the garage entry. The applicant has worked with the neighbors and has tried to incorporate the concerns of the neighbors into their plan. Addressing some of the neighborhood concerns accounts for the exception that the applicant is requesting from the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. The specific exemption is from the grading cut criteria. standards establish a maximum cut of 4 feet. The applicant is proposing a maximum cut of 8 feet. This is for the driveway as it approaches the garage. Again, the intent there was to lower that driveway, lower the garage, and then turn the garage to the side so that it is not visible from the neighborhood. The issue of building envelopes was covered in the staff report and also was a topic of much discussion at the Planning Commission during the Planning Commission hearings. The 2 areas of the house that extend beyond the building envelope that was identified as part of the tentative map application is a portion of the front entryway and the bedroom, and then the game room and the covered balcony that's at the back side of the house. The pool and the deck around the pool is also outside of the building envelope. However, the tentative map was silent on whether or not those types of uses needed to be within that building envelope, or whether that building envelope was really intended to be specifically for the home and structures. The tentative map also incorporated language and a mitigation measure that encouraged the preservation of an existing rock wall that was located along Reservoir Road, and or to reuse portions of that rock wall along in new features that were to be incorporated into the project. The applicant is proposing to incorporate the existing rocks into driveway features. The applicant has also offered to use rocks that have been stockpiled from other portions of the site and incorporate that into their plans also. The application was considered by the Planning Commission at 2 meetings on January 24th and February 28th. The continuance from the first meeting was to allow the Commission to listen to the Council's discussions during their 2 hearings on the subdivision. At the second meeting, the Planning Commission denied the application on a 5-to-1 vote. The Commission concluded that it did not feel the Council's intent on those building envelopes was clear. They were wrestling with were struggling with the discussion over whether it was a mandatory requirement or if it was to be used as direction and guidance. There was also some concern on the part of some of the commissioners regarding preservation of the rock wall versus reusing the rock from the historic walls. And on that issue, it should also be pointed out that a portion of the existing rock walls actually extend through the building envelope, so there's somewhat of a conflict between those 2 requirements. So with that, I can answer any questions that the Council may have. Oh, and one last reminder that there is an addendum to the staff report that's in front of the Council.
Thank you. Questions from Council? Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Suda. If you could please expand upon the comments you made about the pool and the building envelope. What is standard practice? What was the interpreted intent of the previous Council ruling? Precedent? Wherever you can go with that would be appreciated.
Typically, the town has not required that things like pools and other landscape features such as that be required to be part of the building envelope. The concept of a building envelope is not a concept that's defined within the town code, nor is it defined in the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. However, in situations where the concept of a building envelope was identified as part of a plan development or as part of a tentative map, it's generally referred to the location of the main house and not to those ancillary structures.
Thank you.
Mr.
To follow up, if I may.
Please.
Has it been customary that those ancillary structures, such as pools and tennis courts, be at least in the LRDA?
Yes, and in this case, they are within the LRDA.
I understand that. I'm just wondering what's been customary, and the answer is yes?
Yes, since the adoption of the Hillside standards in 2004, that has been the standard and required practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserman. Mr. Glickman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reading the transcript of the Planning Commission discussion on this, a point came up that I'm going to look for some legal clarification on, and it was brought up by Planning Commissioner O'Donnell. A great deal of discussion focused on, of their discussion focused on our discussion, which we undertook before we passed the resolution that we did on the subdivision. And the question arose as to whether the Planning Commission should be guided by the council discussion or whether they are either by our wish or by law, if it is law, and that's why I asked the attorney, to look only at the written outcome of that discussion, the resolution and the language in it that we pass. So for purposes of guiding not only this council but also our Planning Commission, I wonder if there are any legal opinions that you could share with us, with the mayor's permission.
Please.
I think it's important to understand that we're looking at two different questions here. The purview of the City Council sitting as you are tonight is significantly greater than the Planning Commission. So to address the City Council's role, first, it's your job as the 5 elected officials to interpret decisions either made by you or by your predecessors and to apply those policies. That's the job of the City Council. As for the Planning Commission, if an issue like this were to arise again, I think the best guideline, and I'm not aware of a specific statute or a reported case, is that obviously the words have to guide, but they can't be used in a vacuum. They have to be interpreted in light of the discussion. Otherwise, there's no ability to function if we're just looking at the straight words on the page. But the words have to guide, and then somebody can say, well, this is what the discussion came about, or this is what brought the motion through. But again, that's very different than what the 5 of you are doing tonight, because as the City Council, you decide what the policy is, and that's not the role of the Planning Commission to decide what the policy is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions of staff at this point? Then we're going to open the public portion of this, and we'd ask that the applicant appellant come forward, and in this case, it's Tony Jeans. Just remind you of our procedure. The applicant appellant has the opportunity to present for 10 minutes, and then at the end of that period of time, other members of the public may speak for 3 minutes, and subsequent to that, then the applicant is called back to have a 5-minute rebuttal or conclusion. So, Mr. Jeans, and of course, if you can do it in under 10 minutes, that's always wonderful. So, you may begin.
Mr. Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen, we're here, I think, in a fairly interesting situation in that I think what we have is more of a technical issue rather than issue as to whether or not there is a like or a dislike or appropriateness for a particular house. I think that the planning commissioners pretty much to a T were supportive of the design that we had put forward. The issue was technical. So let's just go through briefly what happened. It wasn't just a 5-1 vote to deny. First of all, Commissioner Sayok recused herself because she felt there was a potential seeming conflict of interest because she is currently a neighbor of my client. So that leaves 6 people. The first motion at the meeting was to remand for a redesign by Commissioner Kane, seconded by Commissioner Bourgeois. That died during discussion. It never reached a vote. It felt it was going in the wrong direction. It was going to come down in flames. Commissioner Kane then made a motion to deny, again seconded by Commissioner Bourgeois. And after much discussion, they were the only 2 people who supported the motion to deny. The nays were 4, Michichi, O'Donnell, Telsfor, and Rice. That left us with 1 alternative, and Commissioner O'Donnell made a motion to approve with conditions, seconded by Commissioner Michichi. Again, after much discussion, it was voted on and reached a 3-3 vote. And because there were only 6 commissioners, one having recused themselves, we were left with a situation in which they couldn't deny it, they couldn't remand it, they couldn't approve it. So the final motion by Commissioner Michichi was a motion to deny with apologies to the council for passing the buck. That was seconded by Commissioner Rice. The lone nay was Commissioner O'Donnell, who didn't want to send it to you, and 5 people voted for it, and that's where we are now. Initially, I thought that the Planning Commission had erred, and that was one of the suggestions in the reason for appeal. But I think really, in the light of reading the Planning Commission minutes in more detail, I think the real issue is them not being able to determine what you had intended, and so it becomes more of a policy issue. And they're referring it to you, in essence, by denying it, saying, please tell us what you want, what you intend when you put a building envelope on a plan, and then have a tape which calls out a guiding light as to direction. When we designed the house, we felt we were abiding by the town council's direction. I did listen to the minutes. I did consult with the neighbors. We are minimizing grading, and we're minimizing the building footprint. It happens to be not in exactly the same position that the envelope suggests. So now we have to talk about why that envelope is where it is. You have a letter in your packet, which is from the original architectural design team. I think it was HMH Engineering that basically said, hey, we put it just to show that we could, with this subdivision, we could identify a location on Lot 3, one on Lot 1, one on Lot 4, one on Lot 2, where a house could be built. And it was done with nothing other than that in mind. No changes were made to any of the building footprints other than those on Lot 4, which were moved out of a treed area down into a lower area. There was no discussion of any consequence as to the specifics of the building envelope. When you go to design a house, you look at where are the setbacks. That's one thing you look at. You look at where is the LRDA in a hillside area. In that instance, what you're looking for is to avoid areas where you would have to have significant grading and where there would be an extreme amount of trees. The grading is normally where you have more than a 30% slope. There's no 30% slope in this area. But still, you look to minimize grading. On this property, we've looked at the driveway. We moved the driveway away from coming in off the front for a variety of reasons, which I won't get into, which are well documented. We are now sharing a driveway entrance with Lot 2. That is one of the recommendations with the hillside guidelines, which encourages shared driveway. It also encourages having garages which do not face directly onto the street, which again we've achieved. We've also reduced the massing of the building by putting the garage below grade. Unfortunately, in doing that, because a car has to drive in and out through a garage door, we have a small section where we exceed the 4-foot cut suggested in the hillside guidelines. But that is, we believe, well offset by reducing the mass of the building. I think that may be a finding that you need to make. The reason we manipulated the area of the house footprint was to avoid an oak tree at the front left corner of the property. You have a colored diagram showing where the footprint is, where the envelope is, and where the two predominantly intersect, but there are small areas where we've tried to avoid trees, and we built outside the footprint in the lower portion of the lot in order to avoid a tree up in the top left corner. It's an area that does not impact trees, and it's an area where it requires no grading. So we think that that is a good trade-off. The owners have supported this trying to save the tree, as have the neighbors, and they have worked cooperatively together. We think that we have satisfied the requirements placed by the town council in our design. So we have a request, hopefully in less than 10 minutes. One is to approve the project, overturning the Commission's denial, and accepting the Commission's apologies about buck passing. We would also like you to clarify rules relating to suggested building envelopes for future developers, noting how they differ from LRDA of a hillside lot, which we believe is the area that should be considered by any residential designer or architect. And if a better design can be developed by considering an alternative other than the building footprint that is stamped by the subdivision developer, then that should be done. Note also how they differ from setbacks. Also, if you move to approve the project, we would like you to allow the owner to apply for a tree removal permit without waiting for a building permit approval, which may take another 3 months or so. That would mean that the tree removal and tree relocation can take place before the full heat of the summer, and that would give the trees that we are relocating a greater chance of survival. The longer we wait into the summer, the less likely we are to be able to relocate those nice trees, and then obviously we'd have to replant with younger trees. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Jeans. I take it that's the conclusion. Any questions from members of council? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've heard a lot the last couple of meetings about cubic yards of export and that kind of thing, more than I have in the past. Relatively speaking, you have relatively a small amount of export. You have 375 cubic yards. The question is, given the topography of the area where you're building the bowl, is it possible to reduce or eliminate the export by placing the soil somewhere on the site?
I believe it is. We are actually placing 275 yards of cut and fill, or cut, on the site, and we are exporting the 375. We could probably, without endangering the hillside guidelines, which is not placing fill in excess of 3 feet, we could probably eliminate another 200 to 300 yards on the site, maybe only having to export less than 100 yards. And we would certainly work with staff to make sure that we do that within the framework of what is reasonable and with the hillside guidelines, if you so suggest.
And one more.
Please.
In the staff report, the staff has suggested that they would like you to reduce the parking size of the parking bay so that the landscape could be increased. My sense from reading the report is that that is a concept that's not acceptable to you, and I was wondering if you could address that issue.
Yes. In providing a guest parking area for the house that is within the driveway framework rather than out on the street, I was trying to give 2 parking areas side by side so that 2 guests could park for that, you need about 20 to 22 feet. You need, about 22 feet in width. I think I'm down to 20, 21, 22 feet in width. I did reduce it to that as a result of earlier discussions with the town. The other thing that I looked at was the fact that that guest parking area is 6 feet below the level of the street. And if you were to look at the grading plan, so any cars that are parked there, you won't really see them. They'll be down, the height of a car is about a little under 5 feet. So you won't really see those. And I felt that the 8 feet between the street and the parking area was sufficient to put a nice landscape design of bushes and shrubs into that area, and that it would be invisible anyway. So it was not really that I objected to doing it. I felt that it wasn't necessary because of the elevation change, and that I felt that it was appropriate to leave it as it is. I'm prepared to look at it further, but that was my rationale in the design. If it had been up at street level, I'd have tried to find another solution without removing additional trees.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Jeans. We do have a card or two. Mr. Davis, you had a 1 on yours. Was this intending to talk to this issue? Okay. Oh, you missed the 0. Okay. I'll put it where the space is. Okay. The first speaker is Susan Kenkel.
Hello, I'm Susan Kankel. I live at 99 Reservoir Road, which is directly across the street from Lot 3. I think that in 2004, when we finally got all your attachments and your decision on this whole process, we were very happy to see that it protected our trees, a lot of them, the ones that were going to be left. It protected the slope and the neighborhood feel, and it did a lot to protect us from monster homes. This is not a monster home. This is a nice home, and we're happy to have it. And we feel that giving up the rock wall, the portion of rock wall which they are asking to dismantle, is a small price to pay for the way that they are sharing the driveway. They don't have another entrance onto the road. It's going to be 1 story from the street. It's a very nice plan. And so that wall has been dismantled partially anyway in the process of removing the reservoir, so we've lost a great deal anyway, and I hate to see anything historic lost, but it's already on its way. It will protect some of it, and they will reuse the rocks, and there is some more wall on, I think it's Lot 2, I don't know, the other one on Reservoir Road. So we feel that's a good trade-off, and we're very happy to have this house. We hope you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kenkel. Mr. Davis, Citizen Ray.
Yes, I wanted to comment on this application because I've been part and party of it from the beginning. But first off, I must say to Mrs. McNutt, it's my considered opinion, Ms. McNutt, that you have evidenced yourself as a liar or as a person of
Mr.
extreme
Davis, you need to be speaking
dishonesty
to
in your
Mr.
intellectual
Davis.
process, so I ask you to resign.
Davis, you need to be speaking to the
Well, I have
agenda
nothing
item.
to say to Mrs. McNutt on this issue.
Do
okay?
I need to excuse
so
you? from
please
the-
don't interrupt me because I need to
Do I need
proceed.
to excuse you?
You're taking up my time. So are we clear, Ms. McNutt, how I feel? I hope so. And it ain't going away either. Beautiful home. Meets the Hillside Design standards and the general plan one of the most important directives of the general plan, L18.10, Hillside Design Standard. Houses shall be designed to step down the contours rather than be designed for flat paths. Beautiful. Okay? Congratulations to the applicants. The only thing that I would urge you to do is to, and I'm talking to you three, basically, because I know how Mr. Glickman's going to vote. The roof over the patio at the end of the home is one roof too much. A roof too much, okay? It looms, it will loom to the next home coming on down below on lot 4. They'll look up and they'll see this looming apparatus above them, okay? So the town architect recommended it be taken off. I'm saying I think he's right. So that's my only basic complaint, other than the fact that a major complaint that the foundation has no drilled piers or grade beams. I can't believe that anybody in their right mind on a sloped lot like this, in a property this close to the the main fault line and so forth, would risk putting a beautiful home on a flat pad, cut concrete slab foundation without piers. I can't believe it. And, this has been taken out of the public discussion, and it's done behind closed doors at the engineering department. Just 2 years ago, every time an application came in, the foundation was part of the public discussion. Not now. It's sealed off. The public is out of it, and shame on you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Mayor? Comment?
I hope this is a clarification only and not any other issue, but yes, you may.
Thank you. As Councilman McNutt was also concerned with things that Mr. Davis said, Mr. Davis, who seems to be so sensitive to how his name is pronounced, continues to mispronounce mine, and I continue to wonder why.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glickman. The next speaker is Lee Quintana.
Didn't mean to do that. I guess I'll hold it then. Good evening. Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue, and I just want to address two issues. One is the rock wall, and the other is whether the project is categorically exempt or qualifies under the previous negative declaration. With respect to the rock wall, I had submitted a letter to you, and one of the things I indicated in it was the conclusion of the ARM, Archaeological Resource Management, who did the photo documentation on the removal of the reservoir, which was one of the required mitigations. And in that, he says additional mitigation for the project includes the preservation of the remaining rock walls, as well as the appropriate reuse of materials from those walls, which were demolished during the course of the demolition and grading. Being that I had raised the question about whether there was a difference between preserving and demolishing, I sort of expected to get some explanation about the meaning of both and clarification from the consultant as to what he meant by his mitigation. Didn't see that, so I called the consultant this afternoon. Unfortunately, I didn't find out about the response letter until this afternoon because I was otherwise occupied. And I was not able to speak with Mr. Cartier. He was out of the office, but his assistant did call Mr. Cartier, expressed my concerns about what the meaning of the mitigation was, and I was told that in fact, the intent was to integrate the walls into the future project, and that technically the demolition and reuse of the walls would be within the parameter of that mitigation. However, it would be the least desirable. He also indicated that they had not been consulted about any subsequent project as a result of the subdivision. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is whether it's exempt or comes under the existing negative declaration. And I agree with the acting counsel when he says that it's not subject to a new EIR or, excuse me, a new ND or an EIR. However, given that some of these impacts to the wall were not anticipated under the negative declaration, the envelope only covered a small, building envelope only cut off a small portion of the wall and could have been easily designed around. The movement of the envelope and the house being designed to go completely through the wall, I think raises it to the point where it's covered under 15164, which requires.
Thank you, Ms. Quintana. Thank you very much. Just for point of information, we did receive an interpretation from our counsel. And the short answer is the negative declaration that was performed for the subdivision review is sufficient. No further environmental review must be performed. Okay. And there were a set of specific evidences noted on that report, and that report to be available for you through the staff. Okay.
Oops. I read that and I agree with the short answer.
Thank you, Ms. Quintana. And I do believe that probably we will talk about the actual language of the rock wall, because in the mitigation measure reading, it seems clear to the chair that the rock walls and stairways, and this is the quote from the mitigation measure reading, the rock walls and stairways shall be preserved for possible incorporation into future residential development. Okay. I'll read that again. Rock walls and stairways shall be preserved for possible incorporation into future residential development. Where walls are in disrepair, the remnants shall be incorporated into future landscaping and be made into an element for an entryway into the subdivision. So it's a much more flexible delineation of the rock wall issue, I think, than was initially noted within the discussion of the Planning Commission. All right. We have no more cards, and I see none coming from the audience, so I'd ask Mr. Jeans to come back for 5 minutes of rebuttal or any other conclusions he'd like to draw.
Yes, I'll talk briefly about foundations. A structural mat slab foundation is a very appropriate design in earthquake country. It's significantly more expensive than a pier and grade beam foundation. It also requires a lot less grading or export, because you don't have to cut the 2 additional feet necessary to provide the crawl space under the grade beam. If we were doing a pier and grade beam foundation, you would have in the order of 500 additional yards of export. It is very common, especially when you have a cellar area, to use a structural mat slab, because the slab itself becomes the foundation for the retaining wall that is built on top of it at the edge of the cellar. And it's a very efficient way to design something that is waterproof and also structurally very strong, as long as it's a structural mat slab and not this common slab that you find in a garage, which is a floating slab, which has no structural integrity and does not tie itself to the building. Talking about the rock walls, I like that wall. I wish we weren't taking it out, but when you negotiate with owners, with neighbors, with the staff, with everyone, eventually you reach a compromise, and the compromise that you try and reach is what's best. And I think we've done that here. We are unfortunately having to take down the rock wall. Now, it is, those of you that have gone to have a look at it, it's not a mortared rock wall. Those rocks are just placed in situ. It's a dry stack wall. So we are not using any great effort to take it apart. an earthquake could even move it. It has no steel, no rebar, no integrity. We're putting back onto the site rock walls that have integrity and that are faced with the rock that is used here, so hopefully they'll be around for a long time. We also felt that there might be some concern over the fact that the mitigation measures are unclear, and so we have elected to use additional rocks that have already been demolished from other areas of the site when the reservoir was removed, and we're using those on the site as well. So we're providing yet additional mitigation that I feel was not really necessary. We're using rocks from other lots, Lot 1, Lot 2. Lot 4 hasn't really been touched yet, as I see it, and hopefully the owners there will be able to use the rock wall because it's not in the building footprint or the anticipated building footprint for that project. I think those were the two areas that were addressed. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Jeans. Any comments from council or questions from Mr. Jeans? Then you may be seated, Mr. Jeans.
Thank you.
That will close the public hearing. At this time, we will discuss among ourselves, perhaps even obtain a motion. I think at the initiation of our discussion, I should disclose that I had the opportunity to meet with the developer and the property owner regarding this particular property, and also did visit the property site. Any other council members wish to disclose?
I did as well.
I did as well.
And I?
So that's unanimous. We all had a chance to visit and to have some discussion. I look to council for more question, discussion, and a motion, or a motion. Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask staff a couple of questions before I proceed? In the staff report, you did have, as Mrs. Spector, I think, pointed out earlier, a couple of areas of concern. One was the additional landscape screening around the parking bay and modifications of the driveway design to protect the trees. It looks like in the draft conditions, you worked in a couple of conditions that would give you the leeway to work with the applicant about that. Am I reading that correct? And do you feel if we were to move forward that that does give you enough authority to find a solution, work together to find a solution?
I believe it does. It gives us the flexibility to work through those driveway areas, whether it's for the landscape issue or for to fully implement the requirements of the arborist. It's a bit of a squeeze, and we acknowledge that to get the required setbacks for the tree, push that driveway parking area away from the street more. So you're really trying to balance all of those factors there.
Please.
And the additional items that came up during conversation this evening, the 375 yards of cut and possibly being able to find a home for that on the site, is that something you think you can work with the applicant on? And also the request about getting the tree relocation permit lickety-split so that they can get the trees in before the hot weather?
First of all, on the tree relocation, I would suggest that the council add that as a condition to this approval to make that clear. That's not the town's standard practice. However, given the reasons for the relocation, I believe that does make a lot of sense for this project. So I would incorporate that as a condition of approval. And then secondly, on the trying to reduce the amount of export, that's something we can do at the building permit level to the satisfaction of the directors of Parks and Public Works and Community Development, with the following caveats or requirements: that the revised grading plan comply with the hillside design standards, development standards and guidelines, other than the exception that may be granted tonight. Secondly, that no further tree impacts be caused by the modification to the grading plan, and that third, no further environmental impacts be created by the modifications to the grading plan.
Okay, you want to continue?
Yes, please. I just wanted to I've spent quite a bit of time on going through this. It kind of reminds me, if you've watched Survivor, which I do on Thursday nights, they have challenges where they often have this gnarled knot that they have to try to untie, and that was very much feeling what this project was about. It very much felt like a knot. I really appreciate Commissioner O'Donnell, Planning Commissioner O'Donnell's comment about that really what we have to go by are the ordinances and the resolutions, what we have, much more so than any discussion, testimony, or discussion that might have happened leading up to that. You know, council members come and go, commissioners come and go, but really what we have to work with in terms of governing the town are the laws, the resolution, and the ordinances. So if you look at that, then I start through the resolution. The original resolution on the subdivision, 2004-4, references the subdivision site map as a guide, not as an absolute. And even if you look at that map, it makes sense because square footage on possible home sites is indicated as plus or minus. The what's referred to as the building envelope is just a dotted line that, as Mr. Jeans pointed out, just really shows, yes, there actually can be enough land set aside there for a home to be built. After that subdivision was approved, we approved the Hillside Standards and Guidelines, which gives very strict guidelines. And so then I applied this, as Planning Commission did, to the guidelines, and what I see is that it's within allowable floor area. The shared driveway, as was commented on by someone this evening, is recommended in the guidelines. It's set into the slope to minimize visual impact. It steps down with the terrain, as Mr. Davis mentioned. The trees are being relocated to preserve and to screen. The removed trees will be replaced, so we're not losing any canopy. The house and pool are within the LRDA. So the only thing we have left is the deviation for the additional grading, and it seems to me that this is exactly what the exception policy in Hillside Development Standard and Guidelines is designed for, because by allowing this extra, which we might even be able to reduce even more, it is going to have less impact on the neighborhood and better fit the contour of the land of this particular property. We get to the rock wall, and I look at the language there. As the mayor pointed out, it says the rock walls shall be preserved for possible incorporation into future residential development, and where they're in disrepair, they shall be incorporated into future landscaping or be made into an element for an entryway into the subdivision. So with language like that, again, that seems to me to be conditional, and that you look at it for each particular situation and figure out from common sense and from that situation what's appropriate. So, Mayor, thank you for allowing me to kind of go through my thinking process that sums up several hours of stewing over this. I'm prepared to make a motion at this time if that is okay.
Certainly agreeable to me.
With you. So I will move to grant the appeal on the basis of policy interpretation by council, not error on the part of the Planning Commission. And I do believe I can give you the findings right now that this project is categorically exempt to the state environmental guidelines as adopted by the town, that the exception to the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines is justified for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, and that otherwise it's in total compliance with Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to grant the appeal and approve the ANS application. The basis of the application's granting would be that council finds that the Planning Commission was dealing with a policy issue that was not under their purview, and there is no indication of any error on the Planning Commission's part. We have a second on that. Council discussion. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion as well. And in the conditions, one of the conditions, number 15, rock wall, says the stones from the rock wall on the site shall be preserved and shall be incorporated into the new driveway walls to be constructed as part of the project. So it's not if they can, it's saying they shall be, and that is a condition of approval. I also think it was an interesting point that was made about the building envelope and the building footprint. The envelope was was originally created, and then the footprint that has come forward after several months of work is actually smaller in square footage than the envelope. So I applaud the applicants for doing that, and all of it's in the LRDA. So for all of those reasons, I certainly support the motion as made.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserman. Mr. Glickman?
Yes, thank you. I will also be supporting the motion, which I seconded. So a couple of comments. First of all, I heartily agree with what Councilwoman McNutt said about that we have discussion. I want to feel free to explore issues and think about things and explain why I'm taking a certain position. But at the end of the day, I understand that the laws that I vote to pass are what's written down. As I asked our attorney tonight, we can certainly have discussion, but that's indeed what should guide the Planning Commission, unless there's some real tremendous uncertainty about what we meant. And as I read our resolution, I didn't see that uncertainty. I saw direction, and I think that in this case the direction was followed. In the case of the building envelope, it's my understanding that when a proposal for a subdivision comes before us, it has to be demonstrated that it's in some way buildable. So the proposer will come, well, I could build a house here. In this case, you went a little further than that and said, look, this is a particular area of the lot that we'd really like to see the house built on, and that is indeed what they did. It's in the location of the building envelope. It doesn't follow the exact outlines, which I don't think were our original intention to say this shall be inch for inch the exact building envelope. As far as the dirt is concerned, our hillside standards and guidelines in no small part were designed to discourage people from hacking up our hillsides and doing unnecessary moving of dirt. And also, it is an impact when large trucks full of dirt move through town. I'm concerned about those issues. I'm a little less concerned with losing our precious Los Gatos dirt. I mean, it's dirt. But having said that, I'm hearing from the information from the neighbors that they're pleased with the project. It seems like a house that fits in both with our intentions in the neighborhood, so I'm pleased to support it. I would certainly encourage staff to work with the applicant in seeing if we can move a little less dirt, but I wouldn't say you absolutely have to, because at the end of the day, we want a good project there. If we can, that's great. If we can't, well, then we'll have a good house.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Spector.
I have a little different take on this, but let me start out by saying I am going to be supporting the motion. And the different take I have is I'm the only council person up here who wasn't present when this resolution was approved. And I hate to say this, but I don't think the provision that the Planning Commission struggled with for 2 meetings and 6.5 hours of tape is as clear as my colleagues think it is. And the reason is that it's unclear as to, everyone keeps saying that the footprint or the envelope was a guide, but that's not what it says. It says it's guiding the review. So I don't see the language as being as clear as they say, but I'm fortunate because I'm sitting up here with 4 people who are actually legislative history, and you're not that lucky very often. So they have explained what it is that their thinking was, and so I will be supporting the motion. And even without my colleagues who enacted this legislation, I did find some things on the approval on attachment 44 that would indicate to me that the envelope was not supposed to be the one and only envelope. And one of the significant things to me was that the rock wall went through the proposed envelope. Now, I know that Ms. Quintana pointed out that, well, yes, but you could put the envelope, the building footprint outside of that. But that, in addition to the fact that the council chose not to do a deed restriction, again, convinced me that this was not supposed to be the one and only envelope.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Spector. I need to ask the maker of the motion a question. In terms of the tree removal permit, Mr. Suda indicated that if we were to agree that that was appropriate, that we should add a condition of approval for that. Is that in your intention?
It is, I forgot because I was talking too long, but yes, I would like to do that.
All right, and for the seconder of the motion?
Yes.
All right. Then the other issues, the potential reduction of export and that guest parking, and this, if I'm to understand this correctly, this is basically an issue that can be dealt with between the staff and the applicant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to support it as well. There are a lot of familiar faces in the room from those several years back. We've all grown very familiar with this property, and my last visit, I walked the property and kind of envisioned the old reservoir and realized how much that's changed since we had those earlier discussions, and frankly, how much better it is now than it was then. So I look forward to this house as being the cornerstone to the rest of the development. And with that, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion as stated, indicate.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, and as the winners leave the room, we're going to move to our next public hearing. This is to consider a request to modify a conditional use permit for a restaurant with alcohol service. That would be Viva Primavera. To expand hours of operation, modify the outdoor patio dining area, expand to an adjacent tenant space. This would be formerly High Tech Burrito. Expand to a full liquor for Viva A Go-Go and allow service of alcohol in the outdoor seating area for Viva A Go-Go. And expand approved entertainment on property zone C1, APN 523-01-012 and 013. This is conditional use permit U07006, property located at 15960 and 15970 Los Gatos Boulevard. The property owner is COLG LP. The applicant is Viva Primavera LLC. I ask the staff to make a presentation at the front end.
Thank you. The applicant Viva Primavera is proposing a series of applications, an architectural and site application and a conditional use permit application that incorporate a number of components. First of all, they are requesting a conditional use permit to expand into the adjoining space that was formerly occupied by High Tech Burrito. They're also proposing modifications to their conditional use permit to expand the hours of operation, allow full alcohol service for the entire restaurant, including the former High Tech Burrito space, allow alcohol service in all of the outdoor dining areas, and modify the entertainment provisions. The applicants have also proposed modifications to the outdoor patio area, and that incorporates the items that are included under the architectural and site portion of the application. Under this proposal, the applicants would create a connection between the two tenant spaces and operate the existing quality restaurant, Viva Primavera, with a high turnover sit-down component or service area, which would be called Viva A Go-Go at this time. They are proposing to maintain the 176 seats that were previously approved for both of the spaces. That includes both the indoor and outdoor seating areas and the banquet/meeting rooms. Applicants are proposing to modify the hours of operation as are specified in the staff report. Proposing to expand from 1 to 2 private dining rooms that can be used for banquets or meetings or general dining. Expanding full liquor for the high turnover sit-down portion of the operation. They're also proposing modifications to or clarifications to the entertainment provisions of their use permit. The current conditional use permit allows for occasional incidental entertainment, such as piano or harp. They are proposing that they retain that language and in addition be allowed to have jazz trios or other similar live music. The required parking for both restaurants is met at the shopping center. In fact, there is under the provisions of the parking ordinance, a slight surplus in parking spaces, and the proposals result in no increase in traffic under the town's traffic policy. The Planning Commission heard this application February 28th. Planning Commission recommended approval of the conditional use permit except for the following provisions. They did not recommend approval of full liquor at the Viva a Go-Go portion of the operation. At that time, the applicants were not able to provide a plan or description on how that service would occur, and therefore the Commission believed that they did not have enough information at that time to afford that a positive recommendation to Council on that. Subsequent to the Commission hearing, the applicants have provided additional information on how that operation would occur, and that's been incorporated and described more fully in the staff report and in the applicants' written materials. The second portion that the Commission did not recommend for approval is the request to extend the hours to 1 a.m. The Commission determined that the hours not be extended past the currently approved midnight, and the Commission found that there was not adequate justification provided to grant the request. The third area is that in regards to entertainment, they concluded that the expansion or modification of entertainment should not be allowed. The Commission came to the conclusion that the expansion was not appropriate, that it was not consistent with the town's alcohol policy. As you'll recall, the town's alcohol policy states that in order to approve entertainment at an alcohol serving establishment, the town would have to adopt a process for that to occur, and to date the town has not adopted such a process. The staff report has identified two possible interpretations for the Council on this issue. The one is the Council could determine that the concept of adding jazz trios and entertainment such as that is consistent with the previously adopted provisions of the conditional use permit. Therefore, it does not represent a modification, and essentially the entertainment that's been approved for this establishment predates the current alcohol policy. And under that interpretation, again, there would be no change to the current language in the conditional use permit. The second is that the Council could conclude that this is in fact an expansion of the entertainment and would be, in that case, in conflict with the town's alcohol policy. Staff has also prepared an addendum and a desk item on this matter that offers modifications to the proposed condition language based on discussions at staff and questions from the Council, and those modifications are intended to clarify the provisions of this use permit. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Suda. And I'm going to ask the Vice Mayor if she would speak first.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Suda, I'm confused between the staff report and the letter that we got as a desk item. Is entertainment currently approved for Cafe Primavera? Because I don't see it on their paperwork.
You're referring to the existing use permit?
Yes.
Yeah, the entertainment provisions were part of the applicant's proposal, so a part of their project description. So there's not a specific condition of approval. It's part of their proposed application. So it's in the written materials. And that language about the occasional incidental entertainment such as piano and harp, that is part of the applicant's base proposal that was approved.
It was a proposal, but whoever was acting on this in 1999 never approved it as a condition of the approval, correct?
It's not specifically called out as a condition of approval.
Okay. And right now, because up till now, when I was reading the Planning Commission's discussion and in reading the staff report, The staff report is talking about an expansion of an approved use, and the Planning Commission seemed to be dealing with it in that vein also, so that's why it was an issue for me. Secondly, is the architecture in sight before us this evening? Or had that been completed already at the Planning Commission level?
It was approved by the Planning Commission.
But it's not before us.
Right. So what is before you tonight is the conditional use permit because of the provisions relating to alcohol.
Okay. And the last question, do we have any other high turnover restaurants in Los Gatos with a full liquor license? Because I couldn't think of any, but I don't know.
High turnover sit-down restaurants, one would be Double D's, is classified as high turnover sit-down. And there is one other, and it's escaping me right now.
Oh, you gave me one. I couldn't think of any. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. McNutt?
Thank you. Mr. Suda, when I went and visited the site, which I will disclose that I visited the site and talked with the applicant, it seemed to me that as soon as you punch a hole in that wall, that you were talking about one business operation, and that seems to be the way the language is being presented here. So if we go on that assumption, staff has trained me on these CUPs to not be focused on what's happening today, but what could happen 6 months, a year, 2 years from now. So if we go on the assumption that this is one business enterprise with different service areas, if in a year the operator of the restaurant decided that it wanted to stop the high turnover sit-down service area and reconfigure its chairs and have all quality dining experience or an additional banquet facility, would that be allowed under this CUP?
Given your question, it sounds as though the premise is the applicant has vested its new permit. In other words, they've begun to operate under the provisions of the new conditional use permit. In that case, the previous provisions go away. The new use permit goes into effect, and that use permit allows for one operation with a quality dining component, a high turnover sit-down component, and then all the other provisions of the conditional use permit. That becomes their new approved operations. Any changes to that would require another modification to this current use permit.
Please.
So what I thought I heard you say, but doesn't seem quite right to me, is that they would be locked in to having 16 seats allocated for high turnover restaurant use. They wouldn't have that flexibility, because it seems to me just from, and I see the attorneys wanting to talk, but it seems to me from an operation point of view, you have a restaurant, they already have some in banquet and some, in the main dining room, that they can move that around without coming to the town. So how is that different? And I'll be quiet so the attorney can talk.
The way that these draft conditions have been written is, as Mr. Suda said, and it would require a modification. Certainly the council could adopt a CUP that either provided for that flexibility or allowed for certain types of modifications in the CUP, but a specific application came in to ask for a specific type of permit, and especially that's what the, I don't know if it's called a staff memo or a bench memo, addresses, kind of dividing out the fact that once it vests, this permit takes over and controls the whole premises. That includes the alcohol use, and that's why there are a couple different options for that. So as written, it's exactly as Mr. Suda stated, and would need a modification if they switched. And similarly, it would need a modification if they want to expand the high turnover and reduce the size of the quality restaurant, kind of the inverse of the question that you asked.
Okay. May I ask another?
Okay.
Let's do another scenario. What if, let's say a year from now they decide they don't want that additional space, if they put the wall back in between the two spaces. The section to the north, that's currently proposed to be the high turnover sit-down, does that then have to come, I would assume that would have to come back to us, that the alcohol license or whatever would not in that case run with the land, because that would be like creating a whole new business. Yes?
Yeah, this approval would apply to what were 2 tenant spaces that would now become 1 tenant space. That's the approved space. So any modifications to the operational characteristic, to the essentially the footprint of the operation would require a modification.
Okay, I'll stop for now. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Glickman and then Mr. Wasserman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with this concept of it's one CUP, it's one establishment. I also want to reveal that I met with the owner, visited the property. The Ogogo section is, as I understand it, it has a separate food preparation area. It has a separate menu. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that in that section, people come up to the counter to order, and what they ordered, whether it's food or drink, they either pick up at the counter later or may be brought to them. So yeah, when Councilwoman Spector asked about if there's a similar establishment in town and mentioned Double D's is full server service. I mean, you sit down at a table, the server takes your order. You don't go to the counter and ask for your order. So I'm also really struggling with the question that I ask myself is, if this connection was, if this umbilical cord wasn't there, if this hole wasn't in the wall, would we approve a full alcohol service license for this new restaurant with the separate menu, with the salads and the higher turnover, if it wasn't part of the other restaurant? Because it seemed to me in discussions with the owner that a significant part of the business is in that portion is not going to be people waiting for a table in the fine dining restaurant, but indeed people coming in for the higher turnover, more casual dining. And then the question in my mind is, would I approve a full alcohol license for that now? The other question that I'm really struggling with is, and this is just a comprehension question, I also understood that the existing CUP allowed the level of entertainment currently existing. And the question was, well, if we modify it, then it falls under the alcohol policy, and then we have to either override our own policy or decide that until we've come up with an entertainment policy for alcohol establishments that we're not ready to do this. So that's an area I'd just like to get a little more clarification on from staff. Is the current CUP, does it include in some grandfathering sense this right to provide such entertainment as they're now providing, or was it never mentioned? So that's a question. And then I'm just going to have to listen to some more discussion about the appropriateness of extending the full license to what seems to me an awful lot like a separate restaurant. But let me ask the staff the question first about the CUP. If I may, Mr. Mayor.
You may.
In terms of the CUP for the existing Viva Primavera restaurant, it was made clear in the applicant's project description when the current CUP was approved that their proposal included entertainment and included their intent all along. It was discussed at the commission hearing that their proposal included entertainment. It was not specifically called out as a condition of approval, but that certainly was an item of discussion at the commission. The commission made no motion and made no decision to remove it from the request. So our interpretation, and it's been in the interpretation since '99, is that that CUP includes the ability to provide entertainment as was described in their project letter. And that was approved prior to the current alcohol policy, so it is grandfathered in.
Thank you. That was my understanding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too met with the applicants and walked the site, and at that time, it was expressed to me that there would not be an additional alcohol permit requested. And I'm reading the addendum here, and it says alcohol license. The applicant shall amend the existing ABC license or have a new ABC license issued as required by that agency for alcohol service for both businesses. And what I'm struggling with a little bit here is, as my fellow council members have expressed, is this one business or two? And I look on page 3, and I see separate hours. So that inclines me to believe two businesses. I look on the page that deals with the alcohol license, and the conversation I had with the applicant with one alcohol license and not a new license, and that inclines me to believe it's one business. So I guess what I'm looking for from the attorney or from staff through the mayor is clarification. Is this application before us to expand and modify an existing CUP to the space to the north, formerly, I want to say Nuclear or Atomic Taco, I forgot what the name of it was. Whatever it was.
Close enough.
Viva Go-Go, okay? They had good tacos there, too. High tech. Anyway, is it to expand the idea of entertainment, expand the alcohol license, expand the et cetera, or are we creating a new business and a new CUP?
You are creating or adopting a new conditional use permit. However, as staff has been describing the application, we've been describing it against what we consider the current baseline, which are the two currently approved conditional use permits. So the answer is a bit of both, that we consider this to be one new conditional use permit. However, in terms of the discussion and the analysis, we're using the two existing use permits as the baseline.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. When you say you're considering this one new conditional use permit, is it one in which the umbrella goes over the Primavera and the Agogo?
Correct.
Okay, and so then if that CUP is granted with whatever conditions this council decides to grant, then if that wall, the internal wall, is one day filled in, is that other business separately operatable? Do they each then have, since it's two different addresses, do they split the CUP?
The CUP that's being requested covers both addresses, so it was addressed earlier. A modification of that to separate it into two different business entities would require a modification to one of the CUPs and then most likely a new CUP for the second space.
Okay, so a final question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Hey.
To our attorney, please. One of the comments that's made in here is the excellent track record history regarding alcohol and police as a reason for perhaps expanding the alcohol usage. If we grant that one CUP with these conditions and the wall goes back up, can one CUP be taken away for inappropriate alcohol use down the road? Are they both subject to the same? I'm having trouble with having one or two CUPs.
It is one. What's being requested right now and is in front of the council is one CUP. So if there was a split into two separate businesses, once this is vested, then planning would require both of those uses or both those owners to come in and modify the CUP, which it would allow the council to put whatever requirements they believe are necessary on. The alcohol service, I think as the council knows, is an issue that the town has some area of regulation in, but is also up to the Alcoholic Beverage Control or Bureau Control. And they make the decision whether this is going to be an amended alcohol license, two licenses, the same license. That's not within the purview of the town or the council to make the decision actually about the alcohol license. But what is within the purview of the town is to control the CUP for these locations. Right now it's requested to be one location. If it became two again, then that would come back to the council.
Okay, so if one CUP was granted, part of that condition could be it's non-divisible without reappearance to council because the CUP governs both?
I think they're trying to clarify something here, okay? We'll find out in a second.
Through the mayor, if Councilmember Wasserman could restate that question.
Certainly. If what we end up with is the granting of a new CUP with entertainment hours and alcohol, whatever conditions, can one of the conditions of that CUP be that the two addresses, 15960 and 70, that the CUP, since it applies to both addresses, that CUP is valid as long as those two addresses are not divisible, and if they wish to be divided or separated again, then an applicant must reapply for a modification to the CUP?
Yes, I think the short answer is that staff believes that's implicit in these conditions, but we could certainly make it explicit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserman. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. And I think that I have the answer with Mr. Wasserman's last question and your last answer. But there are issues of concern before us dealing with, for example, the full liquor license and the entertainment. So the applicant is asking for full liquor at both addresses, is asking for entertainment at both addresses. All right, so then this wall comes down, which is what Mr. Wasserman was asking about. And so at that juncture, is there, if the applicant gets absolutely everything they want, is there full liquor and entertainment at one side of the wall and full liquor and entertainment at the other side of the wall also?
If I can ask for clarification, I think you said when the wall comes down. Do you mean when the wall comes back up? No, at that point, both sides of the wall would need to come in for a CUP modification.
All right. I think it's time for us to move to the public. I, for my part, will also indicate that I did meet with the applicant or the appellant in this case, and did visit the site. Any others besides myself?
Visited with the applicant, did not visit the site.
Okay. Mr. Glickman?
Visited the site, spoke with the applicant.
All right. And we've already stated that, right? All right. We have a number of cards here, and I noticed two of them from Jeff Hansen and Bo Jacob. You're both part of the applicant appellant organization. You will therefore get a chance to speak with a 10-minute time frame. Okay? And then we have a couple of other cards from other people who do not indicate that they're with the organization. So, gentlemen, you can come up however you wish. That would be Jeff Hansen and Bo Jacob, who represent themselves here as Viva Primavera and Viva Agogo. And if you wouldn't mind being explicit within the 10-minute time frame we're giving you, we'll have a chance for more public input and then a 5-minute opportunity at the end. Okay?
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Bo Jacob, and I'm the attorney and chief financial officer for the owners of Viva. And you guys have actually touched on a lot of the items that I was going to touch on already, so I thought that I would clarify some items for you and then let Mr. Hansen step up to talk more about the operations. He's our operations manager and co-owner, and I think that he'll be able to answer the questions that you might have about how things flow and work within the actual operation. Now, there's been a lot of discussions on whether or not this is one business, two business, or what it is. We actually perceive this as one business. We've actually already been to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission to talk with them about the expansion of our current Type 47 liquor license, which is an on-premises beer, wine, and liquor license. And their comments after we submitted our paperwork and applications to them was that if the town of Los Gatos approved the expansion of our single business, that they would also approve that. They didn't see any problems with that. And so we hope that that might help you make your decisions on how you address the issue with the full service of liquor in the expansion of our restaurant. You know, we certainly want to, or at least request that you approve that, because there are certain evenings where we foresee there would be people waiting outside to get a table within the main dining area. And if we have open seats in our expansion, we don't want to deny them the opportunity to get seated right away and actually order food off the main dining room menu within the expansion. And likewise, we will certainly permit people that want to order things from the main dining room and take them out, take them to their office, take them home for their family, that they could order them, pick those up in our expansion. Be a little bit easier for them to walk in, grab an item to go, than to walk through the main dining room and pick it up back by the bar area or back by the cook station. So we perceive this as really one entity functioning smoothly as Jeff has designed the operations to work. But we just thought it would be nice to have, you know, a quick takeout lunch that somebody could come in and grab something on the run if they wanted to get a salad or something without having to come in, sit down, get a table. So we're trying to really offer a variety to the community. We feel that our restaurant has been well received by the community since we opened in November of 2003. So we're just looking for ways to expand what we offer to the community. And I think that it's been noted in the report from the planning department staff and the commission that there have been no complaints about our operation from neighbors, the police department. It's been, as far as I know, no issues. And so it just goes to show you that Mr. Hanson, who is our restaurateur, you know, his experiences and the wisdom he's gained has enabled him to put together an operation that functions smoothly. We are also in the process of revising and updating our employee manuals and training books, and we're going to put a new section emphasizing, you know, how to deal with alcohol service. You know, how do you deal with the customer that possibly enters our establishment already intoxicated, or somebody that, you know, actually gets intoxicated without our knowledge, and how to handle that. So we want to make sure that, you know, we don't have any issues. I do know that bartenders, you know, absolutely will call a cab if they feel somebody's, you know, had one cocktail too many. You know, it is our intention that anytime anybody orders a cocktail, they have to order food with that cocktail. It's not a freestanding bar. Our main focus is food. You know, about 75% of our current revenues are derived from food sales, 25% from beer and wine and liquor. And we actually think that percentage is going to be greater if we were to separate the operation next door and look at just food sales and just alcohol sales out of the addition, that it might be 80-20 or 85-15. You know, it's kind of yet to see how that plays out, but we really see people, you know, if they want to go in and get the things off the Viva A Go-Go menu item, that they're probably not going to be consuming alcohol, but that we do want that option available in case when they do want alcohol. And then if we have diners that filter over from the main dining room into the expansion, that we don't violate any of the conditions of our use permit. And there's been this discussion about, and I think it was the desk item that was attached to the report from the Planning Commission about the number of seats. Now, the current space that we occupy now has approval for 160 seats. The space next door has approval for 16 seats. We wanted to kind of view that as a whole. We have approval now for, assuming that you do approve our request, we have approval for 176 seats total, and we can configure those however we deem fit. A lot of it's going to be dictated by the customers. If we find there's more people coming in to want to dine in the restaurant, you know, we'll, you know, have more seats there, possibly fewer seats next door, and that might just get played out as we expand and as we see how the customers receive the new location. Then the other item that I think was referenced by Councilmember Wasserman about the hours of operation, and maybe there is some confusion, but we never intended to have one side have one set of hours and the other another set. It's one operation, one set of hours. Right now we're only open in the mornings on Saturdays and Sundays, but we would obviously we're requesting a 6:30 opening time to allow us the opportunity, if we so choose, to expand, into breakfast, either in the entire location or maybe just partition part of it off for breakfast. And then as far as the late night hours, I think the Planning Commission has recommended that we not remain open until or past 12 midnight on Fridays and Saturdays, holidays and evenings before holidays. We actually don't intend to stay open that late. We don't want to stay open. I think we close now about 10:30 or 11. But there are a night or two throughout the year where we would like to be able to remain open past midnight, such as New Year's Eve and maybe some other special holidays. And so we were just seeking that extended time just to allow us on those few nights of the year to comply with the conditions of the use permit. And then I think the only other real issue before the council today is the jazz trios that we currently have on Friday and Saturday nights at the restaurant. There were not any complaints about it, but one day in one of our owner and management meetings, we started talking about that, and we were reading our conditional use permit, and then we were trying to figure out, does this really comply with what we currently are authorized to do? And just since we're going to be filing for the amendments to the conditional use permit and the architectural and site plan application, we thought we would just try to get some clarification from council on that incidental entertainment, as we have approval for currently, includes jazz trios. There was a couple of such as in the, I guess, the information that Cafe Primavera submitted back in 1999, but that was just some examples. I don't read that as an all-inclusive list. Incidental entertainment, it is incidental to our dining. Dining is still the focus. If the jazz gets a little loud or if a customer wants it turned down, we're more than happy to accommodate that request, bring that down to a level so that it is just in the background to provide some entertainment while they dine. And so we were just seeking clarification on the incidental entertainment. We're not asking that you adopt a permit and a standards process for live entertainment in an establishment that serves alcohol. It's a bigger burden than I want to tackle at this time. So with that, I'll open up for any questions you may have, and then be glad to turn over to Mr. Hanson to espouse on the operation.
Well, we may have to turn over to Mr. Hanson for the last 5 minutes. You've got just a little bit of time left on your clock, I believe. Before we go to questions, is there anything else you need to add during this time limit?
After I can think of that.
All right. And so, therefore, I'm going to entertain questions. I have a question for you, Mr. Jacob. Currently, does Viva have takeout?
We do, yes.
How does a person take food out of your restaurant right now?
They, what I've perceived of it, since I'm not there on a day-to-day basis to see how all the operations work, I mainly handle their back office functions and issues like this, that the bartender actually takes that order and submits it to the cook stations, who then prepares the food, puts it in a to-go box and bags it up, and then it's sitting up at the bar. So,
Okay, so someone comes in, picks it up at the bar.
They have to go
Okay,
to the
so
bar.
you currently have takeout?
Yes.
All right. Questions? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs, I want to go back to a statement that you made to help me understand it. You said, we expect very few people who order at Viva a Go-Go will order alcohol, or relatively few people.
Well, we're expecting to be less of a percentage than what we currently have in the main restaurant. But that's kind of an assumption that may or may not play out to be true. We'll just have to kind of wait and see how that works out in the future.
Okay, because I want to be as sure as we can be about the impact of what we do. And so, here's Viva Restaurant, fine dining restaurant, existing sit-down table service, full alcohol license, got a bar. Works very well. We have this new extension, which is not really an extension of the same flavor. It's a different kind of operation. It's a higher turnover. You'll have to tell me a little bit more about the ordering process, because I understood from talking to Mr. Hanson that people went up to in that establishment to the counter and ordered. What I'm asking you is, in terms of the impact that we would have if, for example, we were to say, we're fine on the hours, we're fine on the entertainment, we'd like to wait a while on full alcohol service at the, let me call it the extension, the Agogo. I want to understand, because you're the CFO, what the economic impact would be. Because if you tell me that it leans towards the part of the spectrum that says this could kill the concept, then I'll take that into consideration. If, based on what you said, well, we'd kind of like to have it, but we see the impact as relatively minor because relatively few people fall into that category. We can also take that into account. So I know that it's tempting for you to say, oh, no, we desperately need it, but come on, help us out.
But the way I look at it, when I'm looking at the percentage of alcohol to food sales, yes, it's minor. But if you have that customer that would be a regular patron, but he chooses not to come to the restaurant because he cannot order, a Tom Collins, whatever it might be, while he's having food at Viva Go-Go, now you've lost the liquor sale and you've lost his food sale. So it's hard to really measure the full economic impact of it, but it would be more significant than just the 15 or 20% of the revenues, because we lose that other portion when that customer chooses not to come in.
Thank you.
Okay. Another clarification question from Mr. Wassman and then Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs. The Viva Primavera restaurant I've enjoyed for 4 years. Wonderful management, wonderful food, wonderful everything. The idea of them expanding is very appealing to me. Looking at this, as you said, and I appreciate that clarification, I appreciate you taking a stand and saying this is one business. That helps me with that one or two, what's going on. This is one business, one management company, one manager, CFO, owner, et cetera, et cetera. I like the idea of expansion of Viva Primavera. And along with that, I want as much simplicity and clarification as regards your operation as possible. And that's what I'm looking for tonight. And ultimately, on what, if there's approval, what that CUP has is very simple. But I need you to understand, as I've explained to applicants for 5 years now, when a CUP is granted, it runs with the land. It runs with the property. Okay? It doesn't run with the Jacobs CFO, the Silker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all wonderful people. Okay? You can turn around the following day and sell it to somebody else. And we don't know how things will happen. So when this council approves a CUP, we appreciate your saying, look at our excellent police record, look at our this, look at our that, et cetera. But I hope you can also respect the fact this runs with the land, your business is saleable, and the CUP goes with the sale. Along with all of that, what my desire is to see the Viva Primavera expanding is fine. The incidental music portion is fine. I need to know from you, is there anything else besides the hours of operation, because I'm currently not in favor of going past midnight, but that's a small issue. Is there anything else about your application to expand Viva Primavera over to include Viva Go-Go that this council needs to know or be concerned about or deal with? Because otherwise, I try and keep things simple. I look at it as you're expanding your square footage. Okay? That's what you're doing. Along with the square footage comes some seating. The alcohol license, if in fact incidental music is allowed under the current CUP, that's all that I'm seeing is a business expanding 10% or whatever. Is there anything else that is not obvious?
You're seeing pretty much what our vision was. We're expanding the business so we could accommodate more of our customers at a single time. And at the same time, we decided to kind of add a little bit of flair to the menu and some new items that are looking.
Okay, and that part, no disrespect, I don't care about that part. Okay? If I'm looking at it as an expansion of the current premises from whatever, 5,000 square feet to 5,500, whatever your numbers are, okay? And with the expansion of the square footage and the expansion of the seating and the expansion of the alcohol license and the inclusion of the incidental music, jazz trio, whatever, is that all that I should be looking at? Because what I don't want to happen is I don't want to end up with some project that then can be turned around and bite me in the tush because it's then subdivided and sold off into and that kind of thing. I want to keep it as simple as possible. Am I missing anything?
I don't think you're missing a thing.
Okay.
That's what we're looking to do right there.
Thank you. Ms. McNutt?
Thank you. I had a question of staff and then a question of the applicant. Would a business such as this be allowed to come in 2 or 3 or 4 times a year and ask for a special events permit, like on New Year's Eve, to stay open to a later time than they are permitted?
No, that special events permit could not provide them with an hour beyond what is allowed under the conditional use permit. So it can't be, the special events permit process can't be used to circumvent the CUP or expand beyond what is allowed in the base CUP.
So for them to be open on New Year's Eve past 12, we would have to extend their hours to 1. There is no other way to accommodate one night a year, for example.
Well, you could add language to the CUP that specifically allows them to operate to, say, 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. on the evenings before holidays or something.
Or 6 times a year or something like that.
Yes, something like that. We would prefer that at, say, evenings prior to holidays, something to that effect. It's more specific than 6 times a year. It's easier from a monitoring standpoint.
Okay, thank you. I've never gotten a liquor license, but from a common sense point of view, it seems to me that the alcohol beverage control would not say you can have a liquor license for this business enterprise, but you can't serve liquor in these 300 square feet here.
I don't think they do that either.
Okay, well, so we either say you can have alcohol, if this is one business enterprise with just different service areas, is how I'm analyzing this. So we either say you can have alcohol service in this business enterprise or you can't. I don't see how we can say, and you cannot, for however many square feet, that you can't put it in one particular area when it's one business enterprise. What, am I wrong? Am I
I think
thinking
you're
here?
thinking correctly on that, because it's
Okay.
a Type 47 license which would cover the square footage that we've drawn out and submitted to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. And I don't think they separate the Type 47 and say, well, okay, well, it's Type 47 for this part, but it all of a sudden changes and becomes Type whatever it is for just beer and wine in the other part.
Okay, I think I'm kind of where Mr. Wasserman is in that the sense that I think we've got a little TMI stuff here. We just got so much information about the details of the menu and the operation and the name and so on that it's clouded the issue and gotten us away from the fact that this is one business enterprise with 3 service areas and what we need to protect ourselves for in the future so that his tush doesn't get bitten. Okay, I'm fine. Thank you.
I assume it's technical language. Mr. Glickman and then Vice Mayor Spector.
Okay, thank you. Let me direct to staff the question that Councilmember McNutt just asked. Can we bifurcate this in terms of the liquor license if we wished and say, okay, we're going to approve everything else, but in the Agogo portion, it's beer and wine, should we choose to do that, and the Viva fine dining portion, it's full? What are our options?
You can specify in the conditional use permit, you can specify that one side, the quality side has full liquor, the high turnover side has beer and wine only. Now, how the ABC handles that, I don't know. But in the conditional use permit, you could establish that delineation.
Okay, so we do have that option. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. That was one of my questions, so we'll go on to number 2. It was my impression that a special events permit could be obtained that is inconsistent with the CUP. For example, there can't be amplified music at Old Town under the conditional use permit, but with the special events permit they can. And so I guess I'm not quite understanding what you said.
Specifically in that example, with the topic that came up during the commission hearing was that there are other special events that held at Old Town that are actually sponsored by organizations other than the Old Town ownership. In that case, they aren't governed by the same restrictions of the CUP. But if it's a Old Town sponsored event, then it needs to comply with the CUP.
But it was also my understanding that it was Fidelity that had the special events permit. And I'm just using them as an example because it's the only example that I know of entities that obtain special events permits. And I just want to see what our options are with the applicant here before us this evening.
What I would need to do is actually take a look at those town code provisions relating to special events permits, refresh my memory on that.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might.
You may.
I do remember this issue coming up when Old Town was having special events and there was interest in youth events. I don't know the technical issues which the staff will need to answer. I do know there was a general concern that if it was the intent of the venue, the Old Town, to have regular events, that their CUP be modified and we not use the special event permit as a workaround. So I think that is the case here. If it truly is the intent of the restaurant to hold so many events a year after a certain hour, I think that's why the staff has given you the answer that they have.
Thank you. I think it's time for us to hear from some of our public. So thank you very much, Mr. Jacob. If you take your seat, we have a couple of individuals who'd like to speak. Dave Everly, first. Dave.
Mr. Mayor.
Welcome, Mr. Everly.
Council members, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to speak in support of the operation there at Viva, the fact that me and my fiance enjoy that venue very much and eat there regularly, and it seems to be always in control and very nice environment, no problems, no issues, and just wanted to come and put a good word in for the operation that exists there, and I think what it could grow into. And so I'll make it very sweet and simple.
Thank you, Mr. Everly. I'm very appreciative of that. And Mr. Larry Gersten.
Mayor Brzezinski, council members, thank you. I want to dispel a myth. First of all, there is an item on the Viva menu that's called Gersten's Delight. It does not reflect any ownership on my part. Rather, it reflects upon the fact that our children have all left the nest, and my wife doesn't want to cook, and I don't know how to cook, and so we wind up at Viva. We're there probably 4 or 5 times a week, so I think I speak with some authority on the kind of service and rapport that goes on at this wonderful facility, which has sort of become my kitchen. In fact, we're thinking of subletting ours. If you know anyone who wants a kitchen, let me know. The critical thing that makes Viva so unique is this wonderful music that exists there on the weekends. I don't know all the technicalities about music and alcohol and this and that. I'm sorry, it's beyond me, even though I've been teaching government for 33 years. I can tell you this, that the music there it really distinguishes the restaurant from so many others that I've gone to. And it's quiet, jazz background music that's just so appealing, and frankly, after a while, you sort of like lose sight of it all because it just sort of blends in with the general, very friendly environment. Some concern about music and alcohol. This too is beyond me. The Viva Bar is not what you call the kind of bar where people go to hang out for a night. It's not one of these bars with all kinds of television screens and people parading around. It's a bar where people, maybe 10, 12 seats, I don't know, not very many, where people sit and usually wait to be seated for dinner. So the connection that some people might worry about in terms of the music and the alcohol, to me, is befuddling. This is a quality restaurant with quality management, and I'd like to think with quality customers, where people go, they have a wonderful evening, they're never rushed out, the music only makes it all the more appealing, and it's something you can't even hear if you're outside the restaurant because, you know, there's that seating area outside. I want to hear the music sometimes, and I can't even hear it. It's so quiet. So I hope whatever you do in terms of clarifying, I guess, this one element of the statute or the ordinance, you certainly allow the music to go on because it really is a distinguishing quality that helps to make this restaurant so wonderful and unique. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Gerson, I have a question for you. First of all, what is the name of that instrument you play every once in a while when you sit in? Okay.
That's unfair. It's called a melodica, and yes, the jazz bands occasionally, in moments of weakness, allow me to sit in with them and play. But however, I have no ownership of any kind. It's just my love for music and their kindness.
Well, as a professor of government, I assume you may have been probably toying with the idea of recusing yourself tonight, but given the relationship, I think that you spoke very well for this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see no other cards, so I'm going to ask the applicant appellant to come back up and, I don't know, rebut anything that's been said in the public. But you have 5 minutes. Any further comments you would like to make, either of you?
Well, the only thing I would say is that I think that most of our customers are like the two customers that stood up tonight to speak in favor of the restaurant. We feel that we've provided a great thing for the community, and we hope that each and every one of you feel the same, and certainly welcome you to dine with us at any time.
Okay. Can I ask a question of you? We've talked about two types of restaurants in relationship to your facility. One is fine dining, which we define as white tablecloth, and the other is high turnover. So in other words, you're providing us a hybrid here, okay? Because I'm not aware of any other restaurant that combines both of those categories. And at the same time, you're talking about this extra space is being used for individuals who perhaps because of the main dining room being full, they would need to be seated someplace else, and so they could come into the annex, okay? Is there any opportunity or concept that perhaps that would be just a mere extension of the fine dining, white tablecloths, since it's going to be used that same way on many occasions? I guess for my purposes, we have become very complicated in this proposal and begun to move into areas of great concern when I think I'm in line with what I've heard from Mr. Wasserman and Ms. McNutt, that it seems like a single operation that at face value is relatively simple in nature if it's seen as a congruent whole. So that's a question. Is it possible that this is really just an extension of your fine dining?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Just an expansion of what we currently do.
Okay, so you put white tablecloths out there, you have waiters come out, or servers, let's say, come out?
Kick around ideas of maybe not even have white tablecloths in the dining restaurants. So we like
It's a technical term, actually, okay? I wouldn't go to start removing what you've already got. But the concept of white tablecloth is basically, it's not considered high turnover.
Yeah,
okay.
but I don't want to get committed to having to put white tablecloths in the
Understood. Like I say, it's a technical term. Questions? Yes, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jacob, one of the conditions, condition number 7, deals with hours of operation. I, for one, am not comfortable with granting till 1 a.m. All Fridays, Saturdays, holidays, and evenings before holidays. I am okay, on the other hand, with the 1 a.m. argument before holidays. So I was kind of looking at tweaking that, and what I'd like to do is ask you, is there let me bounce this off you, if I may, and tell me if this is acceptable to you. May I do that, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Thank you. Condition number 7 currently reads, hours of operation, maximum hours of operation for the restaurant shall be 6:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., Sunday through Thursday, and 6:30 a.m. to 12 a.m., Friday, Saturday, holidays, and evenings before holidays. I'm thinking of just adding in the word, and 1 a.m., evenings before holidays, to get that
would suit us just fine.
Get that little extension. I figured that might suit you just fine. But the concern I had was then getting into Canadian New Year's and these kind of things. So what I'd like to do is ask for some reasonableness and perhaps, and no disrespect to my mother-in-law and father-in-law if you're watching, sorry. Instead of 1 a.m. evenings before holidays, perhaps, and 1 a.m. evenings before New Year's, St. Patrick's Day, and boom. Is there maybe 4 of them that you can just throw out? Can we end this thing from my point of view? I should be talking with the speaker here through the mayor, but do you want to confer, and can I have like 4 dates from you, and then I put this thing to bed as far as I'm concerned?
I'd love to do that.
Okay, why don't we approach it this way? Instead of conferring right now, let's see where we go.
Thank
and then if we get to the point where this actually is a motion, then we can make some determination at that time. Other comments, Mr. Glickman?
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Wasserman's comments because I think, at least in my mind, the key issue about hours of operation is impact on the neighborhood. On the other hand, I mean, I want you to be successful, and I want people to enjoy their dining experience. If you're telling us that midnight works 90% of the time, that's great, because that makes it fairly easy. Rather than start listing dates, my inclination would be to, pick a number before holidays, and you pick the holidays. As far as the Canadians are concerned, the envoy will be here tomorrow, and we'll hear from him. But rather than list dates, if that's based on everything I've heard you and Mr. Hansen say, that this is not a whole lot of times, then the enforcement issue notwithstanding, I would just sooner say before holidays, not to exceed a certain number, and let you pick the holidays. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman. Any other questions of the applicant? All right, then, Mr. Jacob, if you'd take your seat again. And this will close the public hearing, and I open it up for a discussion or a motion from members of the council. I do want to make a comment before the discussion, or perhaps to lead the discussion. I can certainly understand how conflicted the Planning Commission was with this application. And kudos to them for working this through to the point where they could say, this isn't working for us. Because I do think there are policy questions that only we can address tonight. I don't know the genesis of this. I just think it became way too more complicated than it needed to be at the front end, and you see what happens when we start to spin things out of control. As I look at this, I see this as a single request for an expansion of space into an already designated restaurant use. No number of seats change. That means no traffic impacts are included. I really don't see this as a high turnover restaurant, even though perhaps the business plan is contemplating this, because it seems to me in your restaurant it's not much different than having 2 banquet rooms that are on the side. It's not much different than having people call in for takeout food that they pick up from the bar. It doesn't seem much different than anything other than some additional seats, and you pick up some extra kitchen space. And when we went into the grand plan, even with a separate name, it started to make this look like something that I don't think it really is. Thus the confusion. So from my perspective, I've heard some clarification tonight that may require some language rewrite, certainly. But I think that a much more simplified view of this, which is mainly we have a white tablecloth, fine dining restaurant that's being expanded into available space, wherein the ABC will determine the appropriate license to allow you to continue your full alcohol service, and that all the prohibitions and the restrictions that are in place have been evidenced in the way you've conducted your operation, i.e. we've had no complaints from neighbors, we've had no complaints from the police department regarding any abuse of alcohol policy, which is the only determiner that we use to evaluate whether a facility can have alcohol use. I think that it becomes much more simple, and it became much more complex than needed to be just because of the way things were described out, and we moved into an area that then started to look like we had 2 actual separate restaurants, when indeed we're talking about 1 conditional use permit with a single name, and that's Viva, and how you want to characterize that internally to me is somewhat irrelevant. The fact is that that the Viva restaurant, which has made its mark on this community, does definitely demonstrate a family-oriented business that has been very successful, particularly under the current ownership. Has earned a right to be evaluated for some kind of extension or expansion, and that would be my inclination at this point in time. I open to the rest of my council for a motion, perhaps, or continued discussion. Ms. McNutt?
Thank you. I think you actually just made the findings, so I don't have to do that on the motion that I am about to make. I do see this as one restaurant with different service areas within the one restaurant. You have, starting at the south end, you have banquet facilities, you have fine dining, you propose to have a high turnover sit down, but you may reconfigure that. I think the protection that we have going beyond the next owner that might be coming along are in the clarity of the words and the conditions in the ordinance and in the resolution. And that's why it's going to be very important to protect us in the future. And I think we can do that. So I am going to move for approval of the conditional use permit. Mr. Brzezinski's already done all the required findings. I do want to make sure, though, that the conditions reflect the revised wording that was given to us in a desk item tonight. So just to go through those quickly, in condition number 3, it be modified to say the approved use is for a quality restaurant with a high turnover sit-down service area which operates music accompaniment, which operates as a single entity and all operations shall be connected. In condition number 4, it would be revised to say, under alcohol license, the applicant shall amend the existing ABC license or have a new ABC license issued as required by that agency for alcohol service for all service features of the restaurant. And also a number of seats. The maximum number of seats for the restaurant shall not exceed 176. Total includes indoor, outdoor, and banquet/meeting rooms. No more than 16 seats shall be allocated to the high turnover sit-down service area. Condition number 8, revised to read, alcohol service. The service of alcohol for the restaurant is permitted only with meals. A meal is defined as a combination of food items selected from a menu, breakfast, brunch, lunch, or dinner. Appetizers such as popcorn, nachos, pretzels, potato skins, relish trays, etc., hot or cold, are not meals. There shall be no separate bar for the restaurant. And condition number 10, occasional incidental indoor entertainment such as piano, harp accompanist, jazz trios, or other live music is permitted. And then on condition number 7, modifying the hours of operation so that it says at the end, and 6:30 to 1 a.m., the evenings before 6 holidays, and I would hope that those holidays would be specified in conjunction with staff, so when this comes back to us for the second reading, they would actually be spelled out. And St. Patrick's Day is not yet a national holiday, so real holidays is where I'm going. So those are all the changes to the conditions I would recommend. You've got the findings, so that completes the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I will second that. Although during the discussion, I'm going to look for the maker of the motion's ascension. Just a minor modification. I think the idea of the 6 holidays is fine. I'd like us to think a little bit about whether we really want to specify them in the conditions of approval. I would rather leave it up to the good judgment of the restaurateur to pick the 6 that he wants. But other than that, I'll second that and look for consensus on the modification.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Maker of the motion, I hear you feeling there.
My intention was that they would pick those holidays and then fill in the blanks. You're saying you don't want them specified at all in the CUP?
That gives them some flexibility in the future to drop St. Patrick's Day into Canadian New Year's.
I was only trying to help staff on code compliance, so Mayor, if the staff's okay.
Let's ask the staff what their feeling is on that.
Well, staff always prefers the specificity. So our preference would be to work with the applicants, and as we draft the resolution, we would bring that back for final adoption. An alternative would be to simply state that The hours shall be 6:30 to 1 a.m. on the evenings before national holidays not to exceed 6 in a calendar year. Does not have to be specified, but we would monitor that for compliance on more of a complaint basis.
That sounds fine to me.
That's fine to me, too.
Okay, so the motion maker and seconder both agree to that language. All right. Discussion. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And what I wanted to do was just restate what I believe you stated, which I thought was so very, very, very important to this, not so much for our applicants here tonight, but for everybody else reading and watching this on KCAT, that the motion and what Mayor Prusinski said is for a liquor license for the expansion of a fine dining restaurant, not a new liquor license for a new high turnover restaurant. The council is not, I'm not in favor, and I believe I'm speaking for the council from what I understood the mayor to say. We are not granting expansion of a liquor license or liquor use for a high turnover restaurant. We're doing that for the expansion of a fine dining restaurant. And I think that's very important that we state that out there just as precedent setting for anything down the road. Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Follow-up question and then a statement. It was not my impression that the applicant wanted the restaurant to be all white tablecloth, or however you want to call that. It was my impression that they still wanted the public to be able to go up to the front, get something to eat, a sandwich, and leave if they want. And there may not necessarily be service at the table. So I need either clarification on the motion or clarification somewhere, because I don't understand what it is that we're voting on.
Well, I'll clarify. I think that if you look at the concept of takeout, and that's the alternative to sitting down, just taking out. And to me, there's no difference if this restaurant chooses to have a special island set aside for takeout, and that's where a person is directed to pick their food up and leave, then that does not change the concept of white tablecloth fine dining. If that person chooses to have that particular item on the menu to sit down and eat at site, to me, again, it seems no different than any restaurant that would have an hors d'oeuvre menu that you could serve from, or a dessert menu, and you could choose whichever menu you wanted to use, and that's all you would do. For example, coming in and to a place like California Cafe, and having their hors d'oeuvre menu that you use for service in the bar area. So that's my clarification. I don't see this as much different than that concept. Vice Mayor Spector.
All right, then following up on that, our ordinance distinguishes between white tablecloth and high turnover. And if this motion passes with the reference to white tablecloth, or at least specifically or conceptually, is that going to give guidance enough to staff? And then I'll still get to my last statement.
Actually, the term we're using here is quality restaurant with a high turnover sit-down service. So,
staff's understanding, and again, based on what we read in the commission transcript, is that the applicant described a slightly different mode of operation, to quote their description, and they talked about food to go. It can have a somewhat different menu. They described it in different terms than the pure fine dining or quality restaurant that they have on the Viva side of the operation. So our understanding walking into this meeting is that this was a high turnover sit-down operation on the Viva Agogo side.
if I could make comment to that, because I think we did try to clarify that, and we find that not acceptable.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
If I could just finish my comments, please. I think what we are deciding is that was the crux of the problem, that is what caused the confusion for the Planning Commission, and that is because it's been so delineated, and I think Vice Mayor points that out very well, that the use of that term and the maintenance of that concept makes this a hybrid that then falls outside our standard evaluative process. And I do believe when we had our dialogue with the applicant appellant that there was an orientation to agree that indeed what apparently appeared at first glance and was in front of the Planning Commission isn't necessarily what is an absolute mandate for them at this particular moment in time. So that's why we came to the conclusion, I believe, the motion that was presented us. Okay, Mr. Attorney.
If I may, it's, I think, staff's understanding that there may be some disconnect, as the Vice Mayor has pointed out, between the intent of the council and the motion that was made. When reference was made to today's letter of April 16th, and there was language read into the motion concerning the approved uses for a quality restaurant with a high turnover sit-down area, and then again, no more than 16 seats shall be allocated to the high turnover. I think it raises the issue that Ms. Spector, or Councilmember Spector, has just brought up, that could be operated as a high turnover restaurant and not, as you just stated, as an expansion of Primavera. And I think that it may be that there's some disconnect between the language of the motion and the intention of the motion, and certainly, if my assumptions are correct, staff can work here to craft a motion that would reflect the intent, or maybe we can just get clarification of the intent.
Mr. Siegel, I definitely appreciate that, and I have the same concern. And when the term high turnover is used, since it is one of our technical definitions of a restaurant type, it does conflict with that which would make this a much more tenable application at this point, and perhaps allow us to draw a conclusion. So, as I said, I do agree, and I think that there are issues with the language. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Part of my discussion was going to be to address exactly that language issue. Mr. Wasserman? Okay, Mr. Glickman.
Yeah, perhaps, and I understand the concern that the mayor had. I was, in the motion I thought that I was approving or seconding, was in fact to approve the concept as I understood it of an area which was of a different flavor, pardon the pun, than the fine dining restaurant. If there's sufficient concern on the council to defeat the motion, then perhaps it would help, with the mayor's permission, for the operators to explain to us how this annex exactly is going to operate. For example, if in fact the patrons would come in, come up to a counter, order, come and pick their stuff up, bring it back to their table on a tray, that's one flavor. If the service in that annex is truly service, you sit down, a server comes over, takes your order, brings the order to you. You can, that has nothing to do with the takeout, because right now you can order takeout from the bar of the fine dining restaurant. I'm talking about the way that the annex will operate. It seems to me that rather than try to fit it into, as the mayor pointed out, because we do have very well-defined categories, if you could explain a little bit more clearly how this annex is going to operate in terms of service, maybe we can make the determination as to whether it's far enough away from a high turnover restaurant to be acceptable to the council, or perhaps not. So, Mr. Mayor, with your permission, could we get some clarification on that?
Yeah, I would like to, but I'm going to ask if the maker of the motion makes a comment, and then Mr. Wasserman, and then we'll get the clarification you asked from Mr. Glickman.
Yeah, I don't want the clarification, because that's talking about a business model that they're proposing to use right now. What we need to be focused on, I think, is the conditional use permit that will be there for eternity for as long as this business operation. and business model. Menus change and staffing models change and computer systems change, so I don't think we should get too focused on that. I would like to clarify what I meant by the motion, which is what I hope was reflected in the words, which is that this is an approved use for a quality restaurant with a high turnover sit-down service area, not a separate restaurant, but a service area, which operates as a single entity and all operations shall be connected. If you think of the restaurant, and again, you have banquet facility, you have the tablecloth area, you have the high turnover area. You have a separate menu for the banquet area. You have a separate way of ordering your food for the banquet area. You stay there longer in the banquet area. Over here, you may have a separate menu for the high turnover area. You go quicker, which is why it's limited to only 16 seats, so it doesn't kick in the traffic impacts, which is why if we were talking about separate restaurants, we would have these different categories. In the middle, yet a different menu. So that is my intention, is for the motion, is what we said here, approving a restaurant that has the ability to have, but not mandated, up to 3 different types of service areas: banquet, regular, high turnover, with limitation on the seats, limitation on the hours, 1 alcohol permit. It's 1 operation. That's it for me.
Okay. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, and I'll be supporting the motion as well, because for me, I see this to be 90% Viva, 90% fine dining, and as Councilmember McNutt said, a high turnover area of 16 seats, which is about 8 or 9% of the total seating. So for me, it's the expansion of a fine dining restaurant, and the motion as made is fine.
Mr. Glickman.
Yeah, thank you. The motion that I seconded is exactly what Councilwoman McNutt described, so I'm still fine with it. I guess I was perhaps a bit confused by what I thought I heard was a bit of a change of direction, saying, no, it all has to be fine dining. If we accept the fact that this is a fine dining restaurant with a high turnover area as an integral part of it, then I think we're fine.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman. And indeed, I have the same feeling. I think it's when we start to break out those categories in absolutes that we get ourselves in trouble with this application. As far as I'm concerned, there is no difference in what we see here than what we see, as I said, I use California Cafe as an example, but pretty much any fine dining or white tablecloth restaurant in town, you're going to have some areas of the restaurant wherein people will come, sit, eat briefly because they're eating an hors d'oeuvre or having a dessert, and they're on their way. That does not trigger a change in the concept of a fine dining restaurant as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Switching gears, make myself the most popular person in the room. The issue, and I'm not going to be supporting the motion, but it's not because whether it's fine dining or high turnover. It has to do with the entertainment. The fact is that at the current time, the restaurant does not have entertainment as part of its conditional use permit. So then you say, okay, but for the past 8 years, they've had entertainment by practice. And when they applied, they asked for occasional incidental entertainment, such as a piano or harp accompanist. If it was limited at that, at their request back in, I think, 1999, then I could support the motion. But the wording now is occasional incidental indoor entertainment, such as piano, harp accompanist, and then it adds jazz trios or other live music is permitted. We all know, and first of all, as Ms. McNutt had pointed out, this CUP goes with the land, and that condition there has no limitations on entertainment. Secondly, we have had a number of restaurants want us to grant them a entertainment, and we have said no because of our alcohol policy. And I think we should be consistent. As I said, I might be willing to consider a an exception to the extent of the request for the harp and the piano, but to go to all other music is permitted it's not acceptable under our current policies and on the way we have treated other restaurants.
What was your instrument, Mr. Gersten? Okay. I don't know if that would work or not. Okay. Let me just comment to the Vice Mayor's comment. The only recent denial of a request of this nature was a restaurant that asked that it would basically change its format mid-evening, and they would remove tables and you would have dancing. Okay. Now, as far as I know, that's not what's being proposed here. That it would change actually in that particular application to a nightclub venue, and that was the denial. And it did relate to absolutely our alcohol policy, no question about it. But from what I understand, the application is saying it's an affirmation that as background, the entertainment as it currently exists will continue to exist as background, not as the central focus of the restaurant, not that the restaurant's going to change configuration in order to accommodate this particular music. And I do believe that was indicated to us by staff as currently valid, and I just want to confirm that with Mr. Suda, and he's nodding affirmatively. Now, if the Vice Mayor's question is, and other music, or whatever that last phrase was, is that the objection that you were raising? Does that change the nature of what the request is? And if that were the case, if that phrase were taken out, then would that satisfy your concerns?
I would need a question of staff, if I might. If it was left at jazz trios and other music, how would staff define jazz trios as opposed to other music is permitted? I mean, I know what I think, but what do you think?
Well, we actually, to frame how we view this condition, we go back to the second word in that condition, which is incidental. And in our mind, when we interpret that condition, that key phrase is incidental. We're less concerned whether it's a piano or harp or a jazz trio or violins or cellos, and more concerned that the use clearly is incidental to the main use, which is to be a quality restaurant. So we're less, and that's why we have the other live music, because we didn't really want to get into a situation where we're sending out our code compliance officer if they have a string quartet. Again, that would be other live music. However, we believe that's still incidental to the main use, which is a quality dining experience.
Right, then to answer the mayor's question, yes, if other live music were removed from the condition, it would allow me to support the motion, but Mr. Suda has indicated that it might cause staff more problems.
All right, make it the motion.
Call the question, please.
Okay, so the question is going to be called, is the language as stated
I'm fine with it.
With its current
As
another
proposed
live
in the
music?
motion.
Okay.
Condition number 10.
Okay, so condition number 10 stands as it is with other live music.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask for a
Mr.
clarification?
Glickman, yes.
Because this came up, and we were really talking about the wine cellar. Do we want to put the word non-amplified in there? Might that just solve the problem? Because that seems to be one of the key issues when we talked about this before.
I'm not inclined, but I did not make the motion.
Maker of the motion's not inclined, and again, I would like to just call the question, please.
So you want to leave, so this would include incidental amplified music? That's fine, works for me.
Now, the manager, before I take our vote, wishes to make a comment?
If you do look at condition 11, the noise ordinance does apply, so that would drive the amplification issue.
All right. Any other comments from staff? Seeing none, the question has been called. All in favor indicate. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1 with Vice Mayor Spector indicating negative.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just
Yes,
so
please.
I transmit to Mr. Korb correctly, I assume on both this issue and the prior one, a resolution should come back to you.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. And that brings us to other business. And folks, you can feel free to stay if you wish. Brings us to other business, and tonight there's no other business. So that takes us then to council matters. I do have one comment I'd like to make. In meetings with the manager and management staff, we're looking to schedule those council in the neighborhood meetings for the months of August, September, October. The intent being to look primarily at three things that I think we have already indicated. The whole question of the library outreach to the community, the general plan update, particularly helping the community understand the various elements of the update, and then the question of emergency preparedness. And what I'd ask is that we consider this as a good end of summer and a good use of our time after the staff has done a good deal of outreach and education to the community generally. Mr. Wasserman?
Question, please, on those council meetings you're referring to.
Yeah.
Are those being looked at on the regular firsts and thirds
Negative. They would be an extra meeting in those months. Okay.
in August and September?
August, September, and October.
And how many meetings were you saying?
3.
Thank you. And you're looking at Mondays?
Mondays, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Glickman.
Thank you. A very brief comment. We had, in my opinion, an excellent discussion with our commissions on Saturday. I had previously expressed a reservation about doing it in a retreat format, and I sort of reiterate that because I think the public would have enjoyed hearing some of the really fascinating subjects that came up. Our youth commission talked about curfews and skate parks, and our transportation parking commission talked about where we build parking structures, and unfortunately, even the press wasn't present. So an excellent meeting, and I think a lot of exciting topics were discussed there, and I look forward to further discussion in public on those topics.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman. I would like to second what Mr. Glickman says. I think it was a very good morning spent together with our commissions. And I was moved by the degree of dedication and the level of real commitment to our community that was expressed throughout. And their game plans, that is, those things that they're looking to accomplish for us, are quite interesting, extensive, and we'll be able to reflect that in return of minutes of that retreat at a certain point. Other council comments? Madam Manager, any manager matters? Then this meeting is adjourned.